I know. I'm sorry.
Later. Before the last one. Is that right? I looked through the thing.
Yeah, just your preference. Yeah, I guess we could.
Like-
Yeah, because that's like the more, this is public, but yeah.
Or when our friends come.
You can amend the agenda, but by the time you did that, we're taking more time. So just remind me next time. Yes, we could.
Nancy's not here yet. Is that SSD webinar? Is that Nancy or?
Nancy's name's on.
Oh, there's Nancy. Connecting.
Yeah.
There's Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
Hello.
Mama won't be here today. She, did I tell you? Her brother-in-law passed away.
Oh, no.
He's been ill for a while.
Yeah.
But that was where she was. Yeah. I feel bad that she came back.
Thank you.
Get some dish back.
So Jeff said that he's gonna be a couple minutes late,
Mhm.
so I think we'll expect to start at 6 anyway.
Okay.
So excited. Sorry?
They make their announcements before we start.
But don't we call it to order and then we
We usually
say
have them.
the meeting's available and, no,
You let them say it, because Spanish people will understand you when you say it.
sure. Okay. It's 6 o'clock. If the interpreters could please make their announcement, that would be great.
Buenas noches. Se utilizará la función de Zoom de interpretación para soporte en inglés y español. Todos los participantes de esta llamada deben seleccionar su idioma de preferencia haciendo clic en el idioma correspondiente cuando el anfitrión active la función de interpretación. Dicha función se encuentra en el panel de herramientas en el icono del globo terráqueo. El modo de interpretación para esta reunión será el simultáneo. Gracias por su atención y colaboración. Good evening. The Zoom interpretation feature will be used in this Zoom meeting for English and Spanish support. All participants on this call must select their language of preference by clicking the language when the host turns on the interpretation feature. This is found in the world icon located on your feature panel. Interpretation for this meeting will be conducted simultaneously. Thank you for your attention and collaboration.
Okay, it's now 6:01 p.m. and I'm calling to order this regular board meeting of the Sunnyvale School District Board of Education. Please note that a recording is being made at the direction of the board and that the recording may capture sounds of those attending the meeting. I see that all board members with the exception of Jeff Arnett are here. So he's just running a few minutes late, so we can begin. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, if there's any member of the public who would like to speak, now we're on to item 2, the approval of the agenda. If there's any member of the public who would like to speak on this item, please use the raised hand feature now. Jesus, are there any raised hands? No? Okay, not seeing any. Board, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move approval of tonight's agenda as listed.
I second. Okay, so that would be Nancy seconded. Thank you anyway. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will vote. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please say aye.
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 The chair votes aye. With that, the motion passes. We're on to item 3, study session. Facilities Master Plan Review and Presentation with Grant Burns, Director of Facilities and Operations, and Lori Van Gogh, Chief Business Officer. She's on the list. If there's any member of the public who wishes, do we do that now or after for this one? Maybe after the presentation. Okay. You're up.
So I'll just start off and then hand it off to Brant. This is pretty exciting. We're getting to the end of what's normally a long deliberate process, but it's been even longer. The whole concept began even before, I think, the shutdown in March of 2020. And then we were slow to get started. We had a big pause in the middle, and I just want to thank LPA sincerely for your patience going through this whole process. I think we're ended up with a really good process and outcome as a result of that. There's some questions about like what we're really looking for, and that'll become more, I think, clear as we move through this evening. So today is intended to catch us all up, of course, on where we've gone through the process, provide the data, and then help the board to start making priorities in preparation for approval at the next meeting. And then I was just thinking, it was good, the good questions through packet review this week about like, well, putting this in a bigger context. And I guess what the bigger context is, this process has gone through and identified very thoroughly at each of our campuses what are specific needs, some that we knew about, some that we didn't necessarily know about, because it was very thorough. Then we got quite a bit of community input from all aspects of our community. So parents, students, employees, everyone, into like what kind of our dreams are. Ultimately, what I'm hoping for is, particularly with our bond programs, is for us as a governance team and for the district and the community to have a clear idea of what the capacity of our bonds are at any one time, right? So we're gonna find that out today. I mean, if you read the packet review, you can see how much left we have in our current bond program. For us to be aware of that, to help us make this, and to have a plan for that amount of money for our projects, so that when things come up, we can weigh any adjustments we need to make along the way. And I think that's, in my old role, I wasn't aware that that was something that we did, but I would really like to do that. So anytime Brant and his team comes to us and says, there's a new project, a new need, it might be a highly important need, that they would come to the board and they say, this is really important. However, when we do this, this impacts this other project that we had down the line. And so we're gonna have to weigh that. Does that make sense? So I think that would be helpful. I think also at the end of this, we're gonna have to grapple with the concept of the potential for another bond and what the timing of that would be. That's not tonight, we're not deciding that, but I think it's gonna become apparent that that may be something that we wanna consider as a board down the line. And this process will position us well if that's a path that we choose to pursue, because we can tell the community with clarity, and we've done that in the past, but here's what our plan is if we're to go out for another bond. Here's what the deliverables will be. So anyway, that's the big picture. And I'm gonna hand it over to Brant, who's worked really, really hard on this. And I appreciate you jumping in the middle of the whole process. So thank you for that, and it's handed off to you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, board. So tonight we are going to be reviewing the facility master plan that LPA has worked collaboratively with Sunnyvale School District. I first want to thank LPA, all their team members for all the hard work and dedication they put into this. I really feel as if though they became part of the Sunnyvale family during this process. With the amount of hours they spent on our school sites, interacting with our community members, speaks volumes to them in this process. I also want to thank everybody that participated in this process. It was time intensive. Most of these meetings were held via Zoom, which is not the easiest of times, but I really think that we got the most out of this process due to the fact that the community wanted to participate. We got input from all the staff and students, faculty members, educational partners throughout the entire basically 2 years that we've been running this. So I want to close that and turn it over to the LPA team to start the presentation. And thank you guys again.
Thank you, Brent. Good evening, President Watson, Dr. Gallagher, board members, and community, and as well as district staff. We're very pleased to be here. What is really the culmination of a 1.5 to 2 year process to look at the Sunnyvale School District's facilities and really understand what are your needs at those facilities, both in terms of repair and improvements, but more importantly, what is needed in terms of meeting the educational needs of your students at your facilities and your staff. So we do have a presentation tonight, and I just need to decide where to point this.
Back behind you, sorry.
Oh, right here. Is it?
This happens with every presentation. There we go.
But this is the test for everybody.
It happens with everyone, so don't worry.
Oh, there we
There we
go.
go.
Did I go back?
We're going backwards on that. You wanna go backwards? or forward?
Yes, backwards. There we go. So my name is Jim Kissel, and I'm Principal and Director of School Planning with LPA. Also with me tonight is Andrea Pippin, who is an Educational Facilities Planner here in our San Jose studio and has actually done all the heavy lifting through the project. So kudos to Andy and all the effort that she's put in. Walter Este is our Project Manager, Managing Director here of Education in our San Jose studio. He wanted to be here tonight, but he was feeling a little under the weather, and we told him out of an abundance of caution, we can take it tonight. So, but he did want to be here. Our agenda this evening is to talk about really what is the purpose of today's meeting? What are we looking to do? You can see some fun props here that we're going to be able to use interactively during the meeting. And I'll talk about that on the next slide when talking about today's targets. We'll go over an overview of the Fmp process and the Fmp website. We'll look at the total program costs. We'll look at what the educational partners here in the district and community have said in terms of their priorities to date. And we'll have then a prioritization activity with the board and then clarifying questions at the end. So in terms of today's targets, as I said, this is the culmination of the process. This is our workshop with the board in terms of trying to understand all of the information that's come to us to date and how does that information then align with the funding that the district could have available from your current bond measure for improvement. So in essence, what we're trying to develop is the roadmap for the next phase of work that can occur at your facilities. And there's some options within that. Very often from board members, we get a question when the master plan comes to them. You know, it can land with a thud. Okay, here's the need. The need is greater than our ability to fund. How do we get to that next step? And one of the things we've been doing through the entire process is asking each educational partner group that we've been interacting with, what are your highest priorities? And we've collected all of those data points. Those data points are within the master plan and will be presented this evening and allow us to run scenarios for the board's review. It is the board's ultimate decision to decide what the priorities are to align with the funding you have. And our goal is tonight to see if we can put the appropriate puzzle pieces on the thermometer we have here. And that would represent then the roadmap for your next phase of work. So I know it's a big decision, but in our past experience, having done 80 plus master plans now, it usually goes very smoothly and the results become self-evident. So I'll turn it over to Andy to talk about our Fmp process to date. talk about our Fmp process to date.
Jim, okay. So here's our schedule. As mentioned, we started back in 2020, took a little break, but you can see our 3 phases that occur within the master plan. The first few months is spent data gathering, meeting with your educational leaders and school site representation to really understand how you currently operate and some of those initial thoughts of dreaming big. Where do you see the district going? If you could dream, what would that dream look like? Also happening at that time was our partner Bureau Veritas, where boots on the ground assessing your current facilities for things that may be broken, need replacing within this 10-year time span of a master plan, and preparing their own set of assessment reports. Then we move into the analysis phase, where we start meeting with the Facility Master Plan Committee to start sharing with that group what the data that we found and what Bureau Veritas found. We start working together with more of your educational leaders to develop the educational program vision, your learning space design standards, and a meeting with the students, really starting to put some of the puzzle pieces together after we gathered all of that data. Where can we take it from there? And then in about September of 2021, started synthesizing that data. Again, carrying on with the Facility Master Plan Committee, updating you, the board, with our progress, and submitting a parent survey. And then in about October of 2021, had our town hall meeting, where we presented all of this data to the community, our first pass at a draft master plan diagram to start off that feedback. Did we get it right? Did we miss the mark? And let's reconcile these master plan diagrams so that they truly will meet your need as you see it today. Here we are, if we jump forward to that red line, 2022, where we're towards the tail end of this process, starting to really finalize the diagrams and the full master plan. So throughout this whole process, we've had meetings with the steering committee, which is that core group of district leaders helping us guide the process and connect us with the right people at the right times. The Facility Master Plan Committee, having 4 meetings there, inclusive of a town hall meeting. So these were gathered about 109 participants. Building upon that were our focus group meetings, delving into educational programs, student services, special education, food service, library, M&O, technology, preschool, and our educational visioning sessions, inclusive of those groups, and expanding to larger thought leaders within the district, adding about 34 participants. And then where we really got the bulk of the input was with our online surveys, principals, teachers and staff, students, both in English and Spanish speaking, and the parents and community. And then of course the school site input, really delving into the nitty-gritty needs of the sites with our principal interviews, site visits, the master plan diagram review period, our follow-up one-on-one meetings to make sure we got those master plan diagrams right and work out any kinks. And there's also the website submission, where that enabled folks online viewing the draft master plan diagrams to submit comments back to us, and we can respond right back to them. That added over another 2,600 participants, leading to about 2,700 participants in total and about 87 total meetings. So pretty robust engagement period, especially for a district of your size. So I mentioned that master plan website. Back in the day, which wasn't too far ago, we presented this master plan as a hard printed binder. We've since shifted, at least for this process, to a website that is a lot more transparent to your community as things get posted along the way as we develop them. It has that interactive feature so people can submit comments back. And it is very, it is updatable. If it was living in a binder, likely it'll start to collect dust or become a really nice paperweight on your desk. Having it on the website, we can update it if something needs to be changed. It's a very simple process rather than collecting a bunch of binders. So on that website, we have 4 main sections. In the process section, you'll find kind of the background info. What is a master plan? How do you use it? what was the schedule for this process, and some meetings. The Facility Master Plan Committee meeting presentations and meeting minutes are posted there, as are the board presentations. In the planning section, you'll find our demographics, everything you'll want to know about the cost for the total master plan need, the scope of work categories that comprise the total program cost, what those estimations are, and the outreach efforts. You can see summaries of those outreach efforts, and then if you want to get into specific, kind of seeing the full results of those surveys, it is all there. And then the educational partner group's priorities is that condensed summary. Along the vision tab, that is where you'll find a learning space design standard, so that when projects get approved to move forward, the determined architect who is awarded that project can reference this document to make sure that any improvements that happen meet these standards, and that it provides some equity and parity across all sites and all spaces within the district. And the sites tab is where you can get into the site-specific information, the functional assessment, which was done by LPA, the technical assessment, that Bureau Veritas report, existing site plan and master plan diagrams, and the school site-specific cost summary, as well as a educational partner priorities summary can be found for each site. And I'll pass it over to Brant and Jim.
Thank you. So I know last board meeting, TK was touched on, and this slide is going to give a little much deeper dive into what that looks like for the facility master plan. So universal TK expansion went into effect with the passing of AB 130 back in 2021. The process will be rolled out incrementally each school year from 2022 to 2023 through 2025-2026. Currently, any student who turns 5 between September 2nd and December 2nd has access to TK. But by full implementation through 25-26, this will allow an additional year of schooling for those students who would turn 5 at any point during the school year, who would have otherwise been seen too young, or would have been considered too young. As you heard at the previous board meeting, we have recently formed a committee affectionately referred to as the TK Task Force. Our committee is spearheaded by Linda Van Maurik and comprised of Jeremy Nishihara, Mary Beth Allman, Kay Lee, Stacy Escabel, Juma Kanongo, and myself. We're working together using enrollment projections, analysis of existing facilities, and the development of our district's vision for TK. The information shared on this slide is guiding us as we're looking towards the future. For the 2022-2023 school year, we have identified the sites and rooms that we'll be utilizing to accommodate the projected TK enrollment increase. Fortunately, we have rooms available to house these classes, so there is little cost impact to the district for next year from a facility standpoint. The school year 23-24 through full implementation in 25-26, we are still in developmental phase of planning for the projected additional 11 TK classrooms. The funding of any potential new construction or retrofitting of existing classrooms for TK will be evaluated, but the available options as of now would be bond funds and/or the use of developer fees. We will also submit grant applications for any projects that would qualify. Although the path to full implementation is still being developed, this is a very exciting opportunity for the district, especially from a facilities perspective.
Thanks, Brian. So within the master plan, TK, we have not addressed the specific solution for TK, since that is the process of developing a master plan always represents a specific point in time. However, we have identified, if you will, building pads in the layout of the campuses, so that as TK comes on board, if you need to add classroom spaces, it's worked into the plan where those units can go. So you wouldn't have to change the plans per se, just account for the rooms that would be potentially added to your campuses as you fulfill your vision in terms of the implementation of universal TK. So the next part we want to get into here is an overview of the total program cost. I always get the fun part to present the numbers. As you all can imagine, there's a lot in the news about what's been happening with construction price escalation and access to materials and other things like that. So there has been a lot of movement. So the costs are higher than they were in the past. I was using the analogy, the first school that LPA did, a brand new elementary school in 1996, we did it for 600 students on 10 acres was $3.4 million. Costs have come a long way since then, and that school today could be upwards of $30 to $40 million. So it just gives you a realm of idea of what you can accomplish with the dollars. But what we've done is we've taken all the needs identified within the master plan, whether they're improvements to facilities, whether they're reorganization of facilities based on the education program, or addition of facilities. We've looked at all of those needs. And the estimates that we've done are in 2022 dollars. And the reason we've done that is because we don't know which projects are going to be prioritized. We don't know specifically what the rollout of those are. And we'll talk more about how do we fund that unknown a little bit later here in the presentation. But basically our costs are inclusive, or what we call total project costs. So they're inclusive of hard construction costs and soft costs, or basically planning costs in 2022 dollars. And that's generally about a 75-25 ratio, 75% to construction, 25% to soft costs. The things that are excluded from this budget and also have to come out of that contingency are utility hookup fees, city connections, offsite work, land acquisition costs, hazardous materials, escalation, and interim housing. Again, that interim housing is very dependent on the phasing of a project. It's one of the things you always try to do is avoid interim housing. Sometimes you can't, but all of those costs are not part of these base construction costs. What is in the estimates is basically what's reflected on your plans in terms of the needs of the diagrams for each campus. And so when looking at the total costs, here we have a summary and we've broken it out by elementary and middle and other sites. So the totals for the elementary schools are about 143.9 million. There, obviously, Bishop, with the work going on there now, is the lowest need there, but there are still a few items yet to complete. And then the highest need, as you can tell, is at Sunnyvale Middle School, the site that hasn't been modernized yet. So it is by far the largest dollar amount, almost representing over 1/3, probably 35% or so of the total program need. There's also costs in there for some improvements here on the district office and maintenance and operations site as well, for a total of about $276 million total project costs. And if we were thinking of that in terms of construction, that would be about 180 to 190 million in terms of construction costs. Now, looking at the funding that you could potentially have available, currently the Ellis Elementary School project is budgeted at $45 million. 12 million of that is coming from Measure G and 33 million is coming from Measure GG. That together with the $100 million bond and subtracting the Ellis costs above leaves about 67 million remaining in terms of dollars in Measure GG. There's about $7 million in potential developer fees over the life of the master plan, next 6 to 8 years, and about 1.3 million potentially in general maintenance funds that could be contributed to the program. That ends up with a total potential funding of about 75.3 million. We have not included any state money or things like that because there's a lot of unknowns about when the state money could come in terms of reimbursements for any projects that you have submitted. And there's some really good things moving at the state right now and potential of contributions by the state actually from the general fund into the school facilities program this year for the first time ever. If not that, maybe even some potential state bond on the ballot in November. So there's a lot of really positive things there happening that could positively influence the budgets for school facilities. But your total potential funding is about 75.3 million. And what we want to do, because we need to cover all those unknowns that I talked about, whether it's escalation, interim housing, offsite issues, we don't budget any more than 2/3 of the total to projects in 2022 dollars. So if we take that 75 million times 0.67, that gives us about 50.5 million that we can allocate right now to projects within the master plan. And our exercise today is to basically work with you and show you some scenarios based on stakeholder input of how that potential 50 million could be allocated. So on the board over here, you can see the 50.4 as the blue area, but we've still put the chart all the way up to beyond that 75 million in that yellow area, because I think we want to try to fill the thermometer all the way, because yes,
But to do SMS, it's 100 million.
correct.
So that just just to do SMS is 100 million.
Correct, there's not enough just to do all the work at SMS. And I would say it's very rare that we see a site that's transformed in its entirety through any one phase of funding. Yeah. But you could accomplish about half of the work there, potentially. So we'll come back to this thermometer a little bit later in terms of our exercise to talk about different scenarios by which we can allocate funding to fill that thermometer. We'll also move that thermometer here over in front of the camera at some points for Board Member Newkirk, who is watching online and can participate in the activity. Any other questions before I go on? So I will turn it back to Andy. There you go.
All right, we know there's going to be some hard decisions that need to be made when taking that full Fmp need and comparing it to your ability to fund. So that's where we come in with the educational partners' priorities. What did the people say? Hopefully we can shed a little bit of light and make your job a little bit easier. So we'll start with the facilities master plan committee priorities. At the final meeting with the FMPC, we went through a prioritization activity and asked them a few questions. So the first activity was to give them a list of the 17 different scope of work categories that the total program cost was broken out into. The scope categories 1, 2, and 3 all have to do with classrooms or site-wide modernization. And then the rest are just various categories, electives, multipurpose room, library, etc. So the first activity that the FMPC did was they each got a limited number of stars, I think it was in this case, to indicate where they wanted, which scope of work, what did they feel was the most important, or would they like to prioritize. And this is actually reflected in the text at the upper right. So the scope of work categories that got the most votes was 14 outdoor learning environments and quads, 2 classroom modernization and reconfiguration, and 1 the site-wide deferred maintenance or site-wide repairs. Then we went on to each school site, and each school site diagram and that site's cost estimate was presented to them, and they also had a limited number of dots that they could spend across the sites. They could spend them however they wanted, bundle up all the dots at one site, one scope category, or spread them out however they like. Reflected here in the chart are the top about 3 ranking scope categories, or the scope categories that got the most dots per school site. And so we can see highlighted in blue where the scopes kind of most commonly aligned, and that was really targeting classrooms with that scope number 1, the site-wide repairs, and scope number 2, the classrooms modernize and reconfigure, and then scope 14, outdoor learning environments and quads. Coincidentally, that aligns with the district-wide scope of work voting. So nice coincidence there. We always like it when things align. We also highlighted the scope category number 3, classrooms new construction. This is addressing portables, replacing portables with new construction. So kind of in the theme of addressing classrooms, which is our interpretation of prioritizing scopes 1 and 2, I think it's safe to assume that scope number 3 is also an important aspect of the facility master plan. And actually, when we looked at counting up all the dots and how many, again, they can spend their dots however they would like across the school sites when prioritizing. So I thought it'd be an interesting activity to add up how many dots were given to each site. And that is what you see to the bottom right. You can see about 4% of the dots were spent at Bishop, 11% spent at each Cherry Chase in Cumberland, about 10% of the dots spent at Fairwood, 9% spent both at Lakewood and San Miguel, 13% at Vargas, 9% at Columbia, and a whopping 23% of the dots were spent at Sunnyvale Middle School. Now, we weren't asking the facility master plan to rank the sites against one another, but this kind of does indicate a need for priority at that site, again, which is why, another reason why we highlighted the box for scope category number 3 there on the chart, just for your consideration, again, moving forward. So the other educational partner group priorities have been presented at previous meetings in the town hall meeting. I did include them here at the end of your packets if you'd like to reference them in the appendix. But here is a summary of the top priorities by the various groups. And I didn't, there were some that aligned, 3 scope categories got, we're aligning 2 scope categories. It was really hard to identify a clear winner, if you will, of the various scope categories. But this tells you how the different groups sort of voted and where they placed their priorities, whether it be the principals in that first column on the left, teachers and staff in the second column, students, parents and community, school site committees, and that facility master plan committee. So a different way of looking at all of this data, which may be a little bit more clear, is on this screen. So we can see from the student online surveys what was prioritized by district-wide, and then when we broke it out by elementary school common priorities and middle school common priorities, each scope of work category that was identified as a top priority is listed there. Same with the teacher survey, the parent and community survey, principal priorities, school site committees, and the facility master plan committee. Anytime a scope of work was mentioned at least 3 times amongst all of the groups, we've highlighted it in yellow here to really distill down, weighing everything the same, what are the most commonly mentioned priorities amongst all these different groups, and that comes back to classrooms. In this case, it's the scope of modernization and reconfigure. It really can go any way. It's really site dependent as to what the need for classrooms is. So I would say this is indicative of those top 3 scope of work priorities when we're addressing classrooms. Also scope 5, multi-purpose room and food service, and 10, building systems. This is more reflective of restrooms and power access, and also the students when they gave that as a priority. Scope 10 there, it was addressing drinking fountains because this was done at a time where drinking fountains are closed off at the school sites. So now we get to get into the activity. Well, I'll hand it back over to Jim. That's not it.
Thank you, Andrea. So that gives you an overview from what all the different educational partners said in terms of priorities, and gives you information to think about as you are looking to fill the thermometer, match the funding you could have available. All this information is captured on the master plan website, and actually as additional funding is identified, or if you go for additional funding rounds in the future, you can revisit all of this with your different educational partners and see if some of these assumptions still hold true in the future. So this data is very useful, and we've gone in for a number of districts and done a master plan update, 4, 5, 6 years later, and found the information still relevant in terms of assisting the discussion of what are the highest priorities in the district. But what we want to do right now is talk about basically a couple different scenarios here regarding how potentially you could place scopes of work on the thermometer based on what all the stakeholders or educational partners in the district said. The total program costs here on this spreadsheet represent the summary of all of the different costs for all of the different needs at the campuses. So the total in the bottom right corner is at $275 million. going across the top, so the vertical columns are each of the individual school sites, and then going horizontally are the 17 different scope categories that we broke the program down into. And what we want to do right now is basically on the table here, we've got every single one of those scope categories printed as a Velcro piece with basically color coded as well to the different scope categories. So we're moving from basically right to left, basically from, or sorry, left to right from numbers 1 to 17. You can just see some photos there of previous discussions, but this is meant to be an open dialogue with the board regarding potential projects that would align with the funding that you have available. So the first scenario that we have is based upon what was the common ranking among all of the groups. So Andrea, if you can maybe put those pieces.
And is that what these big papers are?
Yes, yeah. So what you have is basically this printed in 11 by 17, the two different scenarios.
If we could do a check-in with Nancy to make sure that she's tracking.
Well, this is really not working for me very well at all. I can only see the slide that you're putting up, and it's really challenging for me to, I get the information that you're talking about. I don't have a thermometer. I have the thermometer concept, but I haven't seen what the thermometer is, and
Yeah, we were proposing to move the thermometer periodically after because right now there's not anything on it, and as soon as we get the scenario
Hey,
placed.
will you take it off and just put it there so she can see it, just to even know what it looks like? I think that was helpful for her.
it's,
Oh, that's true.
I was thinking
just
of
take a
maybe
picture of it.
I was thinking
Yes.
maybe too, Basha.
What is that walking?
Why don't I do it?
Okay.
So you gotta turn, you gotta turn around, the camera is that, see that bar right there, right in front
Oh.
of Jim, that's the camera.
Does that work?
So this is can you see the thermometer?
No, she'll need
No.
to, you'll need to
No.
share the screen and then it'll go back.
Guys, I might just take a picture.
Yeah.
Dr. Gallagher.
Wait.
So
You
now you
are,
can.
you are the upper left.
So turn it around. Okay.
So we're just gonna have Mike.
Dr.
take a
Gallagher.
picture.
Turn it around so I can see. Here we go.
Mike's gonna- Andrea, Mike's gonna take a picture and then.
There we go.
I mean, the other thing is that anybody who's trying to follow this also has no idea of what's happening either, so.
Yeah, but I mean, people are welcome to be here in person, and this is an activity for the board.
No, I understand, but what I'm saying is that thank you, helping understand my need also gives context for the public at large who might be viewing that. Thank you.
So don't hesitate to speak up, Nancy, if you need. We'll make it work.
And periodically we will, after we place pieces on the thermometer, we will bring it over in front of the camera. So we'll stop sharing the PowerPoint again at that time and focus exclusively on a thermometer. So what Andrea is doing right now is placing scenario 1, which represents in blue is categories. Is category 1.
I was gonna do it just.
I know. We don't want them to think we're always doing that.
That's right.
Is category 2 there, Andrea? So maybe do 1 then 2. So if we place category 1, which is approximately 52 million, if we place category 2, which is approximately 14.7 million, and that is site-wide routine maintenance and classrooms reconfiguration. And then we place the multi-purpose rooms at 14.9, and the building systems, restrooms, and power at 6.7. You can see basically that it is going to be above even the total height of the thermometer of $80 million. Now, you will notice in the box there on the slide, we totaled those and it came up to only 62 million. And the reason for this is the focus was on classrooms, and category 1 includes all of the buildings on a school campus. So the multi-purpose, admin, library, and other spaces weren't prioritized. So maybe if we just cut that in half, Andy. So we cut scope category 1 in half because we put it in at 50%. And that 50% represents basically the maintenance and modernization improvements to the classroom buildings only.
Okay, I'm not quite following the like cutting that you just did for that first one.
So the category 1 represents, that's basically the Bureau Veritas assessment of all of your campuses. So they looked at every single building and every single system within the campus and projected a cost for that. And because what was prioritized by the groups was in essence classrooms, not the modernization of the other spaces, it always came back to classrooms. Classrooms represent about 50% of that total cost. So just being ballpark,
Yeah.
we put that in at 50%.
Okay, thanks.
And so when we look at that at 50%, plus the multi-purpose rooms at full cost, plus the building systems, that is about $62.5 million. So that, in essence, and you can, when you look on the 11 by 17 spreadsheet, you can see the cost that it projects basically for each of the campuses within the district. And maybe if we could stop sharing for a moment for Board Member Newkirk and hold that in front of the camera. It'd be right in front.
Yeah, that's perfect.
There's one. Oh.
It will go to you.
Okay.
It's there, yeah, just stand right in the middle, the big picture, thank you, okay, gotcha. Move
You
on.
can see the light blue at the bottom is classrooms modernization. The darker blue, number 2, is classrooms reconfiguration, and basically that is moving walls around to meet the educational needs. If there's undersized kindergartens, converting classrooms to be appropriately sized kindergartens. The pink scope is NPRs, and the purple scope is restrooms, building systems, restrooms, and power access. And that adds up to about $62 million. And would touch, in essence, conceptually each site equally in terms of the scopes that are done, although you can see on some of the categories there isn't really a need for that campus, so there are no dollars for that. So it would be, in essence, touching those 4 scopes where there is a projected need. So that is scenario 1. And then maybe if we can just pull those off for a moment, Andy, and we'll go one slide further. If we can go back to sharing the presentation. So for scenario 2, we looked at the concept of concentrating the work at Sunnyvale Middle School. That came up as a projected priority based on the voting of roughly 23% of the different priorities. And we also know that is the site with the largest need. So we did hear from a variety of groups as we interacted that everybody was pretty aware that there was a higher level of needs in Sunnyvale than the other sites. Also, you have improved your classrooms. Now, maybe there's a perception that not everything is done at the classrooms because you can always do more. But we did take a scenario looking at Sunnyvale Middle School. And we didn't pick every category because we prioritized the category based on what we heard back through all the surveys of what were the highest priorities. So we included category 1, site-wide routine maintenance and modernization. Category 2, classrooms reconfiguration. Category 3 is basically replacing portables with permanent. Science and art came up as well, and so that's also replacing portables with permanent in terms of the science labs. Improvements to the multi-purpose room. Student support and counseling, physical education facilities, building systems, restrooms and power access, site utilities, safety, security, outdoor learning environment and quads, and exterior play spaces. These came up and were mentioned on that one chart when we put all the different groups. These were the categories that were mentioned at least twice by all the different groups. So that's why we put those within the total. And that totals to about $82.5 million in terms of all the scope if you do those at 100% at Sunnyvale Middle. Now, again, the $50 million line is the projects you can make sure that you're promising. And between 50 and 80 million is dependent upon savings in the program, identification of other funding resources such as state reimbursement for past projects, and or additional funds that you potentially find that become available. So that is the second scenario. And if we go to the next slide, you can see basically on the Sunnyvale master plan diagram what that includes. So what Andrea has done is black out those areas and scopes that were not included. So you can see it's the parking and drop off along the front, it's the library and the admin facilities. But in essence, all of the other buildings on the campus would be improved for that $80.2 million. So it includes that new classroom building in white in the upper right corner, as well as removal of all the portables and modernization of all the other buildings beyond those that are blacked out.
So up to 50 million, which parts would that be?
And that's actually what we want to hear from the board. I think one of the first discussions, do either of these two scenarios make any sense? Is there a preference among the board members for either of those scenarios? And maybe we can hold the board up for those folks watching online.
So can I speak?
Yeah.
I appreciate the input from the community. But what I don't see here is what are the absolute positive priorities. If I see safety and security, it's hard for me not to attend to that, even though it might not be seen as a priority. Can you help me understand further about what are the absolute positive gotta do it things versus those things that would be hopes and desires?
Yeah, and I have a similar question to add on to that, which is, we've heard over and over that the COVID air filtration systems, that we're putting a harder run on them, that our stuff is gonna wear out faster because we're running more cycles. I mean, are there some things that we'll just need to work district wide, you know what I mean? We just are gonna have to spend it.
Correct. Yeah, looking at the needs, there wasn't anything that was coming up, and you've done a lot of work at your campuses other than Sunnyvale. There wasn't anything that was coming up that I would say, for lack of a better term, is imminently vulnerable to failure. And Brant could add if there was something that you.
So there are some mechanical systems across the district that were identified by Bureau Veritas, and it would be high priority for us to address. I think that part of this activity is seeing how important that is in regards to the rest of the projects that have been identified throughout the process. For instance, San Miguel HVAC system is one that is at the end of its useful life, has been identified by Bureau Veritas as such, and one that we've actually started the design process on seeing what that's going to entail. So those projects have kind of been put on the back burner until this process was complete, because although I do believe that needs to happen, we wanted to see how the board weighs that project versus all the other projects that are identified in this master plan.
So most of the stuff you're talking about would fit under this deferred maintenance.
Yeah, and
Category?
technically it's called routine maintenance now. I should have changed that out before.
Yeah, no, that's fine, but just like, but the things you're talking about, like Veritas found,
Yep.
that would fall under this number one.
Yeah, and so that's the interesting part about that funding slide is that some of these projects you can actually pull from that routine maintenance fund. It wouldn't directly impact the bond. I know that entire accumulation of funds is represented here, but there are certain projects that we can address with bond or with.
Through other funds.
Yes, rather than touching on the bond fund specifically.
Yeah, so like some of that wouldn't actually come from the bond fund,
It
it would
would
come from other funds.
Yes,
So forget the bond fund for
yes. And the other part that Jim touched on is the availability of grants. Those are something that we're gonna actively pursue anytime that we have the opportunity to. Sunnyvale is in a unique position to where a lot of these are prioritized grants, right? There's a rubric that you submit on, and some of them are based off of financial hardship district being like 40 points, free and reduced lunch ratio 40 points, and then 20 points based on like need for enrollment. And we don't rank as high as other districts. So I didn't want to account for those grant funds because they're not guaranteed.
We're less likely to get them than some other districts might be.
Exactly. Sorry, did that answer the question?
Yeah, and looking at HVAC is under scope category number 1. And the San Miguel is about $500,000 for that campus. And on average, the sites of about that age are about $500,000, looking at the HVAC. So that is one item. Safety and security includes items such as new covered walks, marquees, new electronic marquees, and also including safety locks at classroom doors. And on the San Miguel site, the safety locks are about $90,000 on that campus, which is on most of the elementary sites would be around $100,000 looking at the safety locks.
Safety law.
And to chime in on that one, so that is a project that has been developed since Bureau Veritas visited the site. We actually took the initiative to purchase the interior locking mechanism so that any classroom can be locked from the inside with a key rather than just locking it from the outside. So since Bureau Veritas visited our sites, we actually have taken that initiative to switch on all those lock sets.
And we estimated basically going to the Columbine locks, which are electronic. So the other items in safety and security, such as covered walks or the marquee sign, are more optional, but can be deemed a safety item if you're looking at weather protection and things like that, and or public communication in terms of the marquee sign. So, but there wasn't, other than San Miguel, I don't recall anything else really.
There were a couple other campuses that were projected out to like 3 to 5 years. We'd have to address the mechanical systems as a whole, but San Miguel being the most critical to replace.
I have just a general question, so the number 10, the building systems, restrooms and power access, what it is, I mean, I understand the restrooms, but the power access, what is that, like outlets? I mean, I'm just curious, and then I also thought technology, infrastructure, equipment was a separate category.
Right, so the power access, that's, supplying more outlets within the classrooms themselves and learning environments.
Correct.
So I have a thought about the SMS, it's nice that you're conserving newer buildings, thinking the library looks like it's in pretty good shape maybe, and maybe the admin wing isn't as critical as the classrooms. The admin wing has a broken door, does glass that's really broken or messed up. I mean, it's just it's not flexible or a functional space. I mean, in that way, and it's welcome to our campus, and don't use that door because it won't work and it'll fall off or something,
Totally agree. And to that specific point, that is a project that we'll be addressing in-house at some point. And I think Jim can correct me if I'm wrong. We eliminated some of those priorities on there, we took away the scopes because they weren't mentioned. But I mean, if we were to actually start evaluating and we said, And we decided that yes, like Sunnyvale Middle School, we do need to address the front entryway of campus because this is what welcomes our students, and then we can shift things around a little bit.
Now, if I can chime in, since it is something that is broken currently, that will have been caught under that scope category number 1 by Bureau Veritas.
But it's just that, like, it's so old that they can't even really replace things, you know what I mean? Like, oh, we don't even make those windows anymore or whatever, you know, I mean,
I think that's the problem with the door at the semester, that is too old, and in order to change it, kinda need to change the whole
wall.
or something.
Yeah, so they used aluminum and then hung the steel door from it, so it's ripping off hinges. It's whenever it was done incorrectly. That's basically what that one.
Yeah, I would say too is, you know, the intent of the master plan is that you're not getting down in essence to the doorknob in terms of the scope. What you're doing is setting a rough budget for that campus with a scope of work. That would all, in essence, become a design to number when you're looking at those categories. But if other things come up, such as, you know, that like the front door, and that is a high priority to get that fixed, you would basically look at rolling that within the project.
Okay, so I just have one more question, and
Okay.
when was the last time SMS was remodeled or?
It was before my time. I think the science wing was added 10 years ago.
But that was
If
just
you
the
look-
science.
So if you look on the
Yep.
thing, it
Yeah.
has the 3 different times parts of it were done. So
Parts of it.
1961, 1996, and 2012.
And what was done in 2012?
That was the science.
Just the
Science
science wing
wing.
was that one section.
That 2 stories.
So everything else,
2 stories?
No,
That's a
it's
big
just
dog.
really
Just
high.
really tall.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't, Isabel, do you have another question?
anything else that is not the science building hasn't been touched since 1996.
Yeah, I would say that's relatively accurate. I mean, you know, there's some ongoing routine maintenance that we do out there every year for bleachers and stuff like that. But as a general whole, I think the library was touched maybe in the early 2000s. But yeah, as a general rule of thumb, SMS is
Besides
on.
little things here and there.
Yes, no major funding has been spent on SMS.
Hey Jen, just to make sure I understood what you were saying, so like, as we're going through this, like, say we decide like the ones that you picked, like, okay, that's a good general guide, but that's not putting us in like everything under building systems we have to prioritize, right? So once we actually then go do the work, then it's like, hey, actually under that, maybe we wanna do restrooms, but not this, and let's pull in this other piece or whatever. So this is just general, but this bit, like, we're not getting locked into details right now.
Correct, and because you don't have actual architectural plans, it's very difficult, I think, to estimate everything. It's more an art than a science at this point in terms of doing the estimating. You know, we feel roughly that these costs are adequate to do these scopes of work.
Yeah.
But as you can see, this right here, you can see an entire page. These are all the different line items that are in scope category 1. And you don't necessarily need to do all of those on that
When it
campus.
comes to the work, we say, okay, these ones are the priorities. So hey, look, now we have 2 million more. Let's go do that over here.
Exactly.
But this is $100 million, I mean, this is like a really big ticket item. And I think the other issue is that there's 1,000 students at this school-ish, right? And so that they're gonna have to keep going to school while we're doing this project. So it's gonna be like musical chairs for a while. It's gonna be expensive, right? Like trying to keep the whole thing going. But like, so if you could just explain to me, because I feel very strongly that we need to do this project. It's time, it's a great opportunity. You know, there's just so many reasons to do it, and it's just been neglected for a long time. And, you know, through nobody's fault. I mean, I had a backyard, we were gonna redo the backyard, and it's like, yeah, go dig a hole, do whatever you want out there, kids, you know? I mean, because we're gonna, you know, and I don't care what it looks like, because I know eventually we're gonna redo our backyard. So, but that's been going on a really long time there. So, like, if you could just explain to me, like, how much money do you think we would have to go out for a bond to do this project and to still do the safety things that we need to do at the rest of the schools? Like, just how much are we over if this is? Because if you,
That's easy, you just need to look at the numbers, like.
Yeah, as I say, I wouldn't change my estimate off these,
Yeah,
their estimates are gonna be better than anything I come up off the cuff standing up there.
but I mean, we're not gonna just do, like, how, I think you were saying you're gonna do this in phases. Like, are you saying we should go out for a bond that's just the difference between the two and we will, because it's not, probably not realistic that we only wanna do SMS.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, I think we need to put bond in, consider it,
Yeah, I know.
but there might be other financial sources that become available too, so that's just one option. So I think the question is, to accomplish everything at Sunnyvale Middle School plus safety, what's the cost for that? What's the number?
Yeah.
If we're looking at, well, Sunnyvale is about 100.6 million. Safety and security district-wide is 4.7 million. And if you look at HVAC at 500,000 a site, how many sites?
Say in the next 5 years, we have 4.
4 sites, so that's roughly $2 million.
But that's, again, that's not including all the temporary stuff for everything, right? Like,
Correct, that's, you would put another, you would do another third of that. So if you're looking at Sunnyvale is 100 million, 100. And safety and security, let's just round up to 5. Okay, yeah, so that's
we're
3,
not
that's,
deciding a bond tonight though, right? Like, I
No.
don't.
no,
remember.
we're just trying to know about a number, like what we're talking about.
so
The number is
we're,
like 80 to 100,000.
No,
We're-
the
we're-
number is,
we're talking 106 to 107 million dollars.
In the next, 4 years, 5 years? Like, that's the beginning for SMS and the,
That's
Safety.
starts for the SMS and safety.
yeah, that's the start. And that
It's
would be,
SMS, safety, and those 4 campuses for HVAC. So that's approximately $106 million.
that we would need because we have 50.
If you said those were
Right.
the needs, yes.
Jim, I think to answer your original question, it seems like the scenario that focuses on SMS is the one that they're gravitating towards.
It seemed.
Well, so I have a different perspective. I appreciate that SMS needs to have some work done to it. What we've done in the past is queue folks up, and not everybody gets everything on their wish list because costs escalate and things contract. And how can we be equitable in making sure that everybody gets something? So
So Nancy, are you saying you don't think we should prioritize a big redo at SMS in the next few years?
So I think that SMS can be a focus, but I also think that we need to look at if we're doing deferred maintenance at every place. I want to make sure that we're hitting the biggest need because the other thing I heard was that San Miguel.
We just lost you, Nancy.
Oh, she's frozen.
Oh, you're frozen.
She may have to start over.
Jasmine, Isabel, and so what do you think?
yeah, I think that SMS is the one in more need right now. And that, I mean, that sounds reasonable, like the most basic thing in safety and security for the other sites and SMS will be the minimum to start, but do we have like, how are the timings of the stuff? When are we supposed to start, or when will be a good time to start these, to finish these and to get into the other schools? Like, if I am for, I don't know, I'm thinking for San Miguel or Vargas, when is their chance to, 10 years, 8
Oh,
years, do we
To start
know?
doing major modernization.
Yeah, well,
that
how,
makes sense.
what is the rolling clock? Who is next after SMS, and so how, the
Understood.
projections?
Okay, so I would look at it from a total cost point based off of what the estimates are. And then I'd look at when the most recent major modernization, for instance, like I know Lakewood was done 8 years ago, I believe. They'd be towards the bottom. Bishop just happened, they are at the bottom. And then I work my way chronologically backwards on who's got the most major modernizations over the last 20 years.
And SMS has been waiting a long time,
Yeah.
except for the science, yeah.
Totally agree. I know that's
Yeah.
one of the campuses that has not been touched.
Yes.
Nancy, you're back. Did you want to finish your thought or?
Oh, so essentially, it's that timeline kind of thing that perpetuates that. When you focus in on one big thing, then everything goes all at the same time. So I guess what I'm saying is, I realize that SMS needs to have some work over the next few years. And I guess what I'm looking at is trying to stagger things in ways such that everything doesn't all come to that we're somehow that we can stop perpetuating the cycle of we're getting everything modernized and then people are not getting anything happening for quite some time, and then it becomes a crisis, like SMS is a crisis. How can we look at this as an opportunity for making investments that are going to be lasting for a longer timeline than when you build everything at once? Everything has that same kind of trajectory lifetime that it's going to fall apart. Is there any way that we can, looking in this, see how we can leverage the building time, the structure of the building times in this? Because what I don't see necessarily is how these different things are interconnected, and what makes sense from a building perspective of how you integrate all of these activities. I just know that we keep on running into the problem that the first becomes the last in this cycle when we only look at a single campus at a time. And I understand the need, but I'm trying to avoid that Sunnyvale, that any one school site is waiting so long that they're not able to continue to move forward in what students need.
Jeff, I'm sorry. Okay.
Hey,
I thought you were done. I'm sorry. I thought.
Hey, Nancy, so to clarify, what you're kind of saying is like considering like one model is kind of go this school, then this school, then this school, and you kind of do big projects, or another model is do a little thing here, do a little thing there, do a little thing here. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, while Sunnyvale Middle may be the focus of where high needs are, can we continually do things to continually improve our school sites so that Sunnyvale Middle won't be, or any school site won't feel like everything's falling apart at the same time and they were that were only waiting, that they have to wait so long because so that's it's a question of looking at how can we do this differently.
So Nancy, I know that like when my kids were in school, I know SMS has been waiting for projects for a long time, and they always felt like they got bumped to the back of the queue, and they somehow did. They got their new science wing, but there are things like the science wing or things like the Cherry Chase multi-purpose room or renovating the Fairwood like theater area, or like there have been projects at each school site that we've like renovating the kindergarten wing at Fairwood. Like I think that there are projects that we're doing. It's just that we're running into the problem where this is just too big to do all at once because we just left it too long, you know, and it's not, and life happens and other decisions are made, but like other schools were a priority in front of it. And I really feel strongly that, I personally really feel strongly that we do need to do a major renovation at this school. And it's great to keep in mind, you know, going forward, how do we look at our budgets and how do we make sure other things are current and people don't feel left out and neglected for 20 years, right? But, you know, this is the just reality right now. I mean,
I'd be interested, like, kind of those two ideas, like all three of you, your perspectives, and maybe they're the same, maybe they're different, on that idea of, and what you've seen, like that idea of like big, like this school big, this school big, this school big, as opposed to like do a piece here, do a piece there, you know, or maybe it's like, you know, we do all the safety, all, you know, like those little kind of things. I'm just curious, from your guys' experience, like kind of your perspective on the pros and cons or different of those kind of two models, what you've seen.
So I'll go first. So I think that we've kind of, over the last 6 years that I've been here, we've taken that approach to where, yes, we did Bishop as an entire campus, but while that project's going on, we did address Cherry Chase. We did put in a wing over at San Miguel that was smaller, it wasn't an entire campus modernization. I think that is a good approach to using these bond funds. I know this is a unique situation where we're gonna run out of bond funds potentially with the scope of Sunnyvale Middle School the way it is. But generally speaking, since I've been here, we have always done a large project, but made sure that there's enough funding to touch on the needs on other campuses. And I think it's a good approach that's worked well.
We're kind of limited in what we say because we can't advocate in terms of making recommendations. We can provide information, but not advocate for anything. The best thing I could probably say is that we're talking about one part of Measure GG. And Measure GG was a holistic $100 million. We're talking about, in essence, the last part of the bond. So when we think about equity, or we think about what did Measure GG do in its entirety? It did touch many different sites.
Yeah, so I mean, what we didn't say in the beginning is, you know, Measure GG is funding the vast majority of ELPS. That's a huge part, and depending on how we spend the rest of the remaining funds, I mean, it can touch a major part of Sunnyvale Middle School, or it could have a whole bunch of impacts on the rest of the campuses that need it across the district.
Jeff, did you want to chime in?
No, I mean, I think some of the points were already like made pretty well. I mean, yeah, we talked a lot. So I was going to get in there, but everybody else started like talking, and we answered them. So fine.
Well, do you have a preference? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm just kind of. Now, are there efficiencies and cost effectiveness to doing larger projects at once?
Mhm.
So I hear what Nancy's saying, and I agree with it in some cases, but then also I think the fiscal responsible thing is just to do larger projects. Because that was my assumption. So I would be more inclined to pop it in there.
Yeah, with the larger projects, you're able to lock in a contractor at that specific point in time, so you're not dealing with escalation or material price increases. If you're running a multi-year project, you lock it in so you don't have to deal with that. So as a large project, you get a better value than if you were to break that up and spread it out over multiple years with multiple contractors.
Isabel, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, well, it will be It would be great if we have money to do absolutely everything, but and make everything beautiful and new, but if we don't get to actually finish the buildings in one of these schools, then we're just gonna spread the money, putting bandages everywhere, and never gonna have a nice new building and a good lab, good site, because we're gonna keep putting bandages and fixing and buying a new AC here, and so in this way we can actually keep moving with the project. We have some nice projects already in the district, and there have been good examples of what it can be done. So yeah, I definitely think that we should address first the school that is in the worst shape in the district. And yeah, if the basic part would be the safety and security of the other ones, if we can deal with that, and then, move to the next one. Hopefully, I don't know, something happened that we can attend all of the sites before they fall apart, like SMS, but if not, at least we can, try to do the best we can in each site, from this to the next one.
Michelle, do you want to?
I think I already said that, I think for some middle school.
Yeah.
I just have a question related, but I don't know, so Mike, you can say, or Brant, like, this is totally a conversation for another time. Like, doing the dreaming, wishing, right? Like, if we could get like a 200 million bond in the next couple of years, instead of doing one school at a time, could we hire multiple, like how we want to clone Jonathan, can we clone Brant and have the 3 or 4 Brants doing big projects at multiple schools, so it's not waiting 10 or 15 years. So I don't know if this idea, that discussion is a part of facility master plan stuff, or if that's we do a facility master plan, then we can dream, is that a reality or not? I don't know if that's a conversation for now or later.
Yeah, I would say a facilities master plan really identifies the need and then helps, if there is funding available, it aligns a subset of that need with the dollars that you have to give you the roadmap for those, to spend those dollars. Subsequent discussions are really,
it would be that after we do this, could we do that dream?
Yeah, and those discussions can happen at any point,
Yeah.
but they aren't really the role of the facilities master plan. We're identifying the need.
That's what I was kind of thinking, but I just want to kind of check it.
And I would say with SMS, since if we're really gonna do that project, maybe that would be the one, because it's after we've had all this input from all these different community partners and education partners and all of us, the people interested. Maybe that's the one where we could start kicking the tires on some of these concepts, some that have already been incorporated through Ellis and other projects that we've done. But, in some of the community meetings that we've heard and some of the stuff that we've seen where people are talking about, let's have indoor, outdoor spaces, let's do some of that really cool stuff that is sustainable and educational and all that other stuff that, that would be really exciting. And maybe rethink the idea of walking into the shriveled, disheveled, sad office and then going out into an awesome campus. I don't necessarily think that makes sense. Sad windows and doors, just wrong. Because if you're gonna read the whole thing.
The record, besides the broken door, I actually love it, and I love it how it's all windows and light and open. So I actually love the configuration minus the broken door.
But if they were operable or working, that would be awesome.
I will gladly fix the door.
Yeah.
I'm glad to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say, do you?
That building is gonna be, the administrative part is also gonna be part of the plan sooner or later before the new SMS comes together.
Yeah, with the student wellness center or counseling, or how do they use that space? They might, if you said, we are gonna redo this space, what do you really need? They might get very creative. I could see it changing
And actually, you have an aspirational ed spec. When you look at the ed spec and that those learning space design standards as an aspirational document, and you try to get as close to it as you can at your existing sites, and anything you build new, obviously, depending on the budget, it's much easier to get closer to that ed spec. But yeah, there are some of those components in those learning space design standards.
I have one teeny tiny comment about the drawings. I saw in some of them, the driveways got bigger. And I'm wondering if that's because of like new code. Is it because of new code?
We have to meet California Department of Ed requirements if you want to go for funding and get CD approved plans. So you can't have parking cars back up into drop-off aisles. We have to have certain width to the drop-off aisles for parked cars versus fire trucks and all the other items. So we have to account for those when we're doing design. Doesn't mean your existing sites aren't legal per se, but you might be operating on them differently than we do it today.
So like Cherry Chase, for example, Cherry Chase has like a little of each, like it's supposed to be like a drop-off area, but it's emergency vehicles, there's some parking there. But the parents don't behave well when they go in there, they don't follow directions, and the staff can't manage it. So the parents are not allowed to use that drop-off area. And I would just hate to rip out a school garden or kindergarten garden for a drop-off area that people actually aren't going to be allowed to use because of the humans that are using it.
Yeah, and surprisingly, most master plans that we do, we see parking and drop-off come up as a priority, and here it actually was barely mentioned in terms of being a priority. It was brought up as a need to fix, but when it came to push to shove to pick, because we only gave everyone voting about 25 dots. If you had 100 things to vote for, you only got 25 dots. So you had to make hard decisions about the priorities regarding what you thought was most important.
So I guess what I would also say is that with the drop-off issues, that's a safety issue as well. It only different. And while there might be other funding opportunities for that, I think that that's something that isn't necessarily sexy, but it's something that needs to be done for safety and compliance. And so for those sites that have high incident rates, that's something that we need to continually look at.
Well, and it's ironic because they've just made the drop-off area so wide that people just burn around each other and they don't, you know what I mean? Safe drop-off is really important, so. Okay, any other comments before we close? I mean, I think it's been a great discussion. I feel like you have pretty much consensus on the board, in general agreement.
You have what you need?
Yeah, we've been paying very attention. This is because this dollars is a small subset of the total need. It's not surprising that we can't get the thermometer perfect right at this time. I think our intent was to hear themes today and a general indication of the board's preferences. And we're going to be interacting with the steering committee to further refine this and bring it back to the board in the final master plan approval. Now, that being said, if what you see at that meeting needs to be revised or if there's a need for another meeting, we don't have a clock that we're trying to hit. And if we need to add another meeting in the process, we will, just to make sure that that project list adequately reflects the board's intention for the priorities.
So I have two other comments. Number one, when you go out for bond, you need to do things at all school sites. So while I appreciate the looking at SMS, I also want to think about what is our timeline for determining whether or not we might go out for bond, and would that influence one way or another what our priorities would be. Number two, outdoor space is when you're looking at your TK, it's more than just classrooms. It's also being able to have appropriate safe play space. And I want to make that loud and clear that if you're increasing the amount of kids on a kindergarten playground and getting the ages younger, you may need to do a lot more redesign than what you might think about. So that's an additional pot of money that we need to be aware of, that will be in play. And the reality is correct, as far as my understanding are, we're not going to be able to qualify for any of the grant funding that's coming out around TK facilities.
Not that we won't, we just can't be guaranteed it.
Well, the community funded districts aren't in it now. We're not in it. We're not written in yet.
So she's talking about the grants.
Well, for the,
For the grant funding facilities. Right now, as it's structured, we are probably not going to be eligible for those. So that's going to be a reality expense when we're looking at what are more short-term needs.
challenge us with the greenness of the space, with the outdoor stuff. That would be great to see that.
And Nancy, to your comment, I will look into the grant funding comment that you brought up, because I understood it a little bit differently. I just think we ranked extremely low, and if there was additional funding once they got to the bottom of the list where we would potentially be, we would still be eligible to receive funding. But I will look into that further.
I can have a side conversation with you
Okay.
about that. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, well, I really thank you for coming. I feel like it was a great productive discussion, and I feel like even the comments that weren't totally agreeing with each other, we all respect the opinions, and
Do you want to
we're
ask
all in
for
the same place.
public comment?
Oh, now I can ask about public comment. Okay, great. Perfect. So if there's any member of the public that has any comments or questions about this presentation, please raise your hand. Your little virtual online hand feature. Thank you for inviting me. I'm just gonna get to that. I moved this under here. Is there anyone? There is. Okay, well, that's disappointing because this was a great conversation. Okay, thank you very, very much.
I just wanted to share quickly, as one of the people, I know Isabel, and I know you were on the beginning, but then Isabel and I have been on. And I just echo everything they said, right? I think they did a great job. I mean, it would have been great if we could have been in person for some of those things, right? But considering the situation, I think they did a really great job, really engaging lots of people and just working it anyway. So I've just appreciated, since I've seen the process, I want all you know that I've appreciated the process and feel like they've done a good job. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate that. It's been enjoyable to get to know you and your community as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
Setting the bar for community engagement here. Really good.
Thank you.
Excellent, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Do we want to take a short break before we move on to the next section?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna, right now it is 7:30. We're gonna take a 5-minute short recess, and we'll return at 7:35. Thank you.
office too, all of it, all of it,
Right?
yes. Yeah.
It was a, yeah.
Yeah. I think you can like the studio style.
Those are like the classified substitutes. Now we're needing the material. Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep telling people, go apply. Are you bored? Get in the cloning machine. Okay, it's time to get growing. Oh, it's I'm like,
You brought my design, so we make for a commentary before.
I see Nancy. Okay. I'm gonna take out.
Yes.
Oh, it made my screen turn off. Okay, we are late, I'm a little late, it's 7:39 PM. And I'm reconvening this regular board meeting of the Board of Education. I see all board members present. There are translation services available. If the translator could give the instructions again, that would be very helpful.
I need the stop interpretation.
You can't.
Trata de volver a
decir el anuncio.
Now they can.
Go ahead.
What do you?
Go ahead, Monica.
Yes, just 1 second. I was not prepared to do the announcement. We remind you all that there is interpretation services. Please click on the globe icon and select the language of your preference. Bienvenidos a todos. Se les recuerda que hay servicio de interpretación. Por favor, hacer clic en el icono del globo terráqueo y indicar el idioma de su preferencia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Okay, do you need something?
No, the icon, I cannot see the icon, I have the Zoom, so I can see.
Is there someone who could help Isabel with the?
No, I don't need the icon, but I'm just wondering if people if it's turned on, because I don't see it there. Okay.
I would know.
She's saying she has the Zoom on her phone, I mean on her device, but she's not seeing that world icon.
It is on.
It is on?
So they're seeing it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We're on to item 4, comments from the board and superintendent. Nancy, would you like to begin?
Yes, I've been involved in a lot of advocacy work, both with the Santa Clara County School Boards Association, LAC, and also with the the PLC, Santa Clara County, and doing a lot of work around deepening my understanding of UTK and all the implications that has. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
I just wanted to highlight the equity summit that was 2 days ago. It was really great. So I just wanted to, I had to like leave right after really quick, but I just wanted to thank, I know a lot of the staff was involved with putting that together. So I just want to thank all the staff and then all the people who came, right? I mean, the staff who worked on it, but then there was staff who came and families. And from my perspective, it was a really great event. I was grateful to be a part of it.
Go ahead.
Isabel?
Oh, yeah. Well, I suppose the highlight of the last 2 weeks was the equity summit. That was great. There was a lot of participation. People were very active and engaged, and we had those very good presentations. There was a lot of work involved in that day, and it showed, and I think it gave like, it was a big connection with the community. Other than that, there was the Hoffman reading that happened in the last 2 weeks too, for the Hoffman Award. And then some meetings for the Santa Clara School Board Associations. And the stuff for SMS volunteering and the staff and teacher appreciation committee that we worked for.
For the Hoffman, are you being a reader for the Hoffman Awards? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Awesome.
Did you go to site visit yet?
Yeah, it was the other week, I missed the day.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I did the reading
The reading is, yeah.
and the meetings for around that was pretty fun. Very nice projects coming. Oh, and then we've been meeting also with the SEF about the gala, and we can be kind of coordinating the fundraiser for the Sunnyvale Education Foundation.
Okay, so I sent my comments in. I too really enjoyed the Equity Summit and just, thanks for all the hard work. It was just great seeing everybody there and thinking deeply and listening a lot, and it was pretty great. So thank you very much.
Can I just really fast, I forgot to say, I also started that bias book, because we got a sneak peek early, so I don't read what I listen to. I'm listening to on Audible, I started a few days ago, and it's been great so far.
Good. Okay, so a couple of updates. I'll start with the Covet Updates. So we're really looking at how we come out of the President's Week, which is the week off. By the way, never before has been their week off of President's Week so more anticipated than this year. Am I right, Ms. Romander?
You are correct.
Okay, good. Yeah, just our teams have worked so hard since the first of the year till now, and I feel like people are in a good space, but part of that's because we're not in the space we were in January, but people really need a rest and a lot of hard work. So anyway, we're going to look at the status after that, and then begin to pull back some of the I think in a logical way, some of the things that we've been doing. So for example, we're looking at outdoor masking. So we've said throughout this school year that outdoor masking was required. There really hasn't been, I haven't gotten a lot of pushback on that, but I think this might be the time to make that either recommended or voluntary after the break, just to see how that, what the numbers are and what the advice is on that. That's what most districts are doing if they haven't already done it. So we're going to take a look at that. We're looking at starting field trips again, of course, doing it in a safe way with all the other safety measures. So the only difference is a class of students going on a bus to an activity and still being in a cohort. So I think that would, we feel good about that. Starting to let parents and or volunteers into classrooms, checking vaccination status, of course, first, and the masking. So we feel good about that. So these aren't guaranteed yet, but we're looking at kind of fast tracking them after the break if the numbers continue to drop as they are. Then another question that came up from my superintendent's advisory group, which is a group of parents that meets with me, is opening the campuses again to parents. So that's something we're going to look at. I don't know what the timeline is on that, but I know that's really important to parents and to school communities. Just to let parents go to the door of a classroom to meet with a teacher to build that community is really important. There are questions about in-classroom masking, and what we intend to do is to follow the guidance of the state and the county on that. And what we are advocating for strongly, what I've been advocating for strongly, and I know the County School Boards Association has, along with the Superintendent's Association, is that the county and the state give us clear direction so that school boards and school districts are not forced to make public health decisions, as important as that. To me, that's the responsibility of the public health department, and I hope that they take their responsibility seriously and make that decision, and not pit school communities against each other. That shouldn't be our role. I'll switch gears now and talk about the Equity Summit, because I thought too that was wonderful. Really what happened in that Equity Summit was that I was so proud of. First of all, the 102 participants, which is the largest ever, people wanting to show up, more student voice than ever before. I think we saw that, those of you who attended, and more family voice as well. When I think back to the old lyceums, when we first started, we had no students at the very beginning. Then we said like, oh, let's try a few middle school students and see if they'll participate. And we found out that they did. And then a few years later, we said, I don't know if 4th and 5th graders would be any good. Well, they were great. So the student voice was fantastic. And the family voice, parents showed up to participate, which is really what we need in that. So that was fantastic. And we really built the equity lens at the beginning. So the participants had an equity lens to then look at the LCAP goals. So I was very happy with that. And Tasha and Christina really led the effort to put that together. Got a lot of help from a lot of people, but that was a great event. I want to call your attention to the Santa Clara County School Boards Association Legislative Brunch, which is Saturday, February 26th from 9 to noon. Just a reminder, because that's the second Saturday of the President's Week. Linda Darling Hammond will be, it's on Zoom, will be present. She's fantastic. If you haven't heard her speak before, she's the president of the California, what is it? The State Board of Education. So that's fantastic that she's going to be there. And then in terms of advocacy, I'm participating in and putting together a letter based on input from Schools for Sound Finance on TK funding for community funded districts. That's huge. I will share that letter with you so that you can follow up. They're really asking for us to make a big push with our legislators. And then also the advocacy for the public health department to take the lead really on public health matters. So that's what I have.
Thank you. Okay, on to item 5. Comments from the Sunnyvale Education Association. I don't see anyone present. If there's an official representative online, please use the raised hand feature so that you can speak. Okay, not seeing any. Item 6, comments from the California School Employees Association. If there's an official representative online, please use the raised hand feature if you wish to speak. Okay, item 7, comments from the public. This is the time to comment about things not on the agenda. This portion of the agenda provides an opportunity for members of the public to directly address the governing board on any item of interest to the public. However, provisions of the Brown Act, Government Code 54954.2a and .3 preclude any action being taken on an item not appearing on the posted agenda. Time limits allocated to public testimony are 3 minutes per person and 20 minutes for public comments. Speakers are asked to give their name and affiliation so that an accurate record is reflected in the minutes. And as a reminder, per our board bylaw 9323, the board shall not prohibit public criticism of its policies, procedures, programs, services, acts, or omissions. During public comment, we encourage speakers to discuss issues with civility, to treat people whose opinions differ from their own with respect, and to focus on ideas, policies, and values. I don't see anyone here in person for non-agendized items. If there's anyone online, please use the raised hand feature now. Okay, so we are on to number 8, presentations, Fairwood Explorer School presentation with Rochelle Romander, principal. And Shauna Ariel, principal. Hello, nice to see you.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here back with you. And it's time again for annual visit. So had a great time having the team come out to Fairwood and sharing with them a little bit about what's been happening. And it's a pleasure to be able to share with you as well today. And we're gonna try this clicker and see whether it likes me or not. Not yet. You're up there, thank you. Maybe I gotta go that way. So I'm Rochelle Romander, principal at Fairwood Explorer, and I have here with me Shayna Reel, the new assistant principal at Fairwood Explorer. And we're going to be sharing with you some updates for today. Try going backwards. Hey. So a little bit about our school goals for this year. At the beginning of the year, we set out 4 school goals. We think of our goals in terms of kind of 3 levels. Some of our school goals are introductory level goals that we're just starting to build some awareness around. Some of them are kind of implementation level goals, and some of them are refinement level goals. And so our first goal was social emotional well-being. And while this is a goal that we've been working on for a while and so we would kind of think of it as refinement, we also consider it a little bit new this year from the perspective that we're looking at social emotional well-being after a pandemic. So some of the things that we really wanted to do in order to connect with students and support their social emotional development was take 3 key actions. One was committing to a social emotional learning lesson every week. And so some of the feedback that we got from that was that our 2nd grader shared with us, I like doing these lessons because it helps me know how to talk to others. And that's really what we wanted, was coming back from a pandemic, students had been isolated, hadn't really been interacting with others a lot. It gave them a framework for being able to kind of talk to each other again about big issues that are impacting them at school. We also instituted class meetings, and while we'd had class meetings for a while, the expectation was that teachers have a class meeting daily, either an opening or a closing meeting. And a 4th grader said, our class meetings give us a time to pose a problem and decide together how we could solve it. So again, we're looking at students who have been isolated for some time and maybe are still needing to build back up those skills of, when I have a conflict with another student, how do I deal with that? And so the class meetings have become a good forum for helping to support that process. Our 3rd goal around this area was every classroom having a calming corner, knowing that students may need time and space to be able to gather their thoughts, to manage their emotions in dealing with situations that maybe they hadn't been dealing with for a while. We wanted every student to have a safe place that they know they could go with no stigma attached to be able to deal with big emotions. And so one of the students, a 1st grader, said, when I'm feeling sad, I can go there, and when I go back to my seat, I am happy again. And that's exactly what we want. We want them to feel like I can go deal with the emotion that I'm feeling and come back ready to learn. Our 2nd goal was around ELD, and this is an implementation goal for us. We've been looking at ELD for a little while, building our awareness and working on securing our understanding of what practices are best in ELD. And so our goal was, this year we really wanted to provide targeted ELD instruction to all learners. And so this year's focus was on functions. What that means is that instead of looking at what are the little language and vocabulary pieces that we're teaching, we're really going to look at what is the function of language that we need students to know how to do. It really takes us into academic language, because we're looking at, if we know that students are going to be comparing and contrasting, what is the language that a student would need to know in order to be able to effectively compare and contrast? And teaching students those language functions so that they could then effectively engage in academic language and academic work. We looked at, or we're using as a benchmark for our progress on this data, the progress of our English learners. And this chart is not incredibly helpful yet, because we've had 1 data point so far for the year. And so this is just kind of an indication that, like, yes, we are going to be tracking these data, but we also are highlighting how many English learners we have. So on the right side, you see in each grade level how many English learners we have in each grade level. And then the bar there is how many are currently at proficient. And of course, our goal is to be continuing to tick those numbers up. One of the challenges we sometimes have in looking at these data is that when you're looking at English learners, many of your students who are proficient get reclassified. So they kind of drop out of the English learner bucket, and you don't notice the progress that's being made. So one of the other commitments we made this year is that while the students may get reclassified and removed from the English learner status, we're going to track that cohort of students so that we can really see what's the impact of the work that we're doing. Our 3rd goal this year was responsive reading instruction, and this is a refinement goal for us this year. We wanted to make sure that we were having really secure key components of reading instruction happening, especially for our students who missed some of these components due to the nature of instruction last year. So in kindergarten through second grade, we noticed a very recurring theme that students who were struggling in reading in second, third, fourth grade often were struggling with word study. They really had a need for more explicit instruction in phonics and phonemic awareness and understanding how words are transformed within the English language. And so this became a really big goal for us, that every day phonics and phonemic awareness would be happening in the classroom to make sure we get that strong foundation for students. In addition to that, we wanted teachers to commit to daily small group guided reading for our emerging readers. So one of the fallacies that we sometimes see happening in schools is that idea that everyone needs the same thing, but what we know is that that's not true. Some students need something a little different. And so for our emerging readers, they really need a commitment to guided reading daily. So looking at our schedules and rearranging our schedules to ensure those students are getting daily instruction that's guided at their level was a critical step for this year. And finally, book clubs. Book clubs have been a component of instruction at Fairwood for a really long time. Very great component that brings in our parent volunteers and allows them to support the process. But what we noticed was that a lot of the instruction that was happening within book clubs was focused on the within the text questions. It wasn't pushing students to be thinking beyond the text. So really taking a look at our book clubs, our literature circles, and having the teachers think about how can we embed more depth into the conversations that students are having by infusing more beyond the text questions into those conversations. Our fourth, here's a good little example of some fun that our kids were having. This was Le Cafeteria, where the students got an opportunity to taste their books. They had a little guiding sheet there, and they got to take a trip to each table and do a little taste of one of the books, looking at a cover, reading a few pages, and then making some notes about the book so that they could make an informed decision about which book club book they would like to read. It really provided a lot of excitement and energy around choosing their book club book. This year, or this time around, I don't have pictures, but they actually did it as a present. It was really fun. The kids got to read a description of their book, but they couldn't see the covers. They couldn't see the book. They couldn't see what it looked like. They were all wrapped up in a little present. And so the students got to say which their priorities were. And this week they got to unwrap the book that they chose and find out what it looked like. Our equitable outcomes support has really been a key part of this goal this year. And so we've had a couple of milestones as the year has progressed. Our teachers began with really intensive assessment of student skills and looking at what were the areas of need for each one of our students. And then they progressed into building different groups utilizing a variety of staff. So while our equitable outcomes TOSA is meeting with many of the students, we also incorporated support from our resource specialist and our para-educators. And so we've been looking at, after January, we were refining those groups. We've exited students and brought in new students. And so it's been a great process of being able to provide that just right support for students that allows them to then re-enter into the classroom with that additional support and make the progress that they are really proud of. So some of the impacts, we've been able to provide strategic equitable outcome support, beginning with 39 primary grade students. 10 of those students have now been exited from that support and have been transitioned back into the regular supports that they receive in the classroom. Additional students have been added during our restructuring, and in partnership with our instructional coach, the EO teacher and para-educator have actually increased the dialogue about our emerging readers with the teaching staff and supported them in identifying next steps of support in the classroom. And I think that's been one of the really key parts of this, is that in order to really make lasting impact, the classroom teacher can also benefit from that dialogue with the TOSA to really identify what are the specific skills that are keeping this student from progressing to that next level. And then that teacher can reinforce that so that the student is getting really kind of like a double or a triple dip of instruction throughout the school day. And our final goal for this year is more of an introductory level goal. Over the last couple of years, we've been working on culturally responsive teaching. And this year, we brought in Dr. Shiraki Holly, who is working with us from the Center for Culturally Responsive Teaching and Learning. And he's building our understanding of what culture is and how it impacts the way in which we teach and the way in which students learn. And so we've talked about the rings of culture, and the iceberg concept of culture, and we've really been asking this question: how will we be responsive to the cultural differences that exist within our community? Go. There we go. So to quote Dr. Holly, culturally and linguistically responsiveness is the validation and affirmation of the home or indigenous culture and home language for the purposes of building and bridging the student to success in the culture of academia and mainstream society. And so he calls this VABing. It's validate, affirm, build, and bridge. So when we see a student who's engaging in behaviors that may not fit within our school culture or our mainstream culture, we want to validate that that is a behavior that is an appropriate behavior for the student to be engaging in, but we want to also bridge them, let me change that, and we want to bridge them to understanding how that might look different within the school culture. And so recognizing and honoring the home culture while bridging the student into the school culture. So we've identified, or we're using his work that has identified these different areas of cultural behavior, such as eye contact, which is very kind of an easy one for us to see and to understand, that in some cultures, eye contact is considered a sign of respect. In other cultures, eye contact is considered a sign of disrespect, all the way to things like how we speak to each other. For example, in some cultures, verbal overlap in which someone is talking and someone says, "Oh yeah, I totally agree," and they kind of interrupt the conversation or into the conversation and they add on to it. That's actually considered a sign of respect in some cultures. I'm attentive, I'm listening, and I have something to add. But in other cultures, and particularly in the mainstream school culture, that would be considered interrupting, and it would be considered an inappropriate behavior. So being able to validate that engagement of a student verbally overlapping is actually considered a sign of respect in some cultures, and bridging the student to understanding when is that an appropriate behavior in the classroom and when is it not an appropriate behavior in the classroom. So a little bit more just about Fairwood Explorer program. Couple of updates. We are very excited to have over 125 volunteers coming to our school with an average of about 25 daily volunteers on campus. As Dr. Gallagher shared, our volunteers are currently volunteering outside. They've been extremely flexible. We have pop-up tables that we put up. Students come out and they engage in their activities outside, and it's been great. Learning excursions have been on hold, and we're really excited to be bringing those back, hopefully here in March. But the teachers have managed in the interim to be doing a lot of virtual field trips, and they've also managed to kind of make some ways of bringing that experience into the classroom through other means. They've also been trying to keep up with our community events. We've had to alter some of them. For example, we have virtual dances instead of in-person dances. We've also had a great back-to-school picnic this year where families could still socially distance, and it was probably an event that we got the best feedback from in the past 2 years. We also had a spooky story night virtually where some of our parents volunteered to read spooky stories to the student in breakout rooms. So we've been trying to keep those going. We're really excited. We're trying to plan a fun fair, hopefully for the end of the year, if we can continue having our COVID restrictions relaxed. And finally, parent education. We have been continuing with our volunteer training through Fairwood 101, in addition to the trainings that are provided by the teachers. And we've also been having, we have English learner information nights so that we can provide more information to our families about what instruction looks like in the United States, how they can support their child at home, what Hvac is, how they can support their child as they are preparing for that assessment. And now I'm going to have Mrs. Reel come up, and she's going to share a little bit more about Independent Study, which is a new program to Fairwood this year. This one. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shana Reel. I'm the assistant principal of Fairwood Explorer, as well as the administrator for Independent Study. So we're here to just share a little bit with you, as Independent Study is a new program. As we refer to it, long-term independent study is a new program that we're implementing here within the district, and we're housing it at Fairwood. So this is a little bit of our data, as you can see at the start of the year to where we currently are. And so at the beginning of the year, you can see that we had well over 100 students in our K through 8 program, including SDC. And we had 12 teachers that had started the year with us. As we've progressed through the year, we have had students that have exited Independent Study and returned to in-person learning at their home schools. As a result of this, we've been able to have teachers also return back to their home schools. So at the beginning of the year, we had some teachers that left some of their sites and joined us to do Independent Study. They've now been able to return back to their home sites. So we currently have, for K through 5th, we have 5 teachers. We have 1 teacher doing our middle school, 6 through 8. And we have 1 teacher working with our SDC students. We are just under, well, we're now under 90 students that are currently still enrolled with us, and we are still continuing to have students exit the program and to continue to return back to in-person learning. This shows you a little bit about who has come into our program. It gives you some information in regards to some of the race, taking a look at their comparative to the district. Again, the Independent Study program, although it is housed at Fairwood, it serves the entire district for that. You can also see some of the other demographics in terms of English language learners and some of the socioeconomic disadvantaged students, and you can see who again has come into our program. We wanted to share some successes of our program and seeing a look. So we have an example of a student, and so the student is a 6th grader that is currently enrolled with us. At this time, they are pursuing some competitive gymnastics, and so they needed some flexibility within their day to be able to, pursue interest as well as, kind of maintain and successfully pursue and progress in their academics. So they are able to attend their one-on-one meeting in person weekly with their teacher. They are able to attend their daily morning meetings, and they're moving through the 6th grade curriculum successfully. And so it is working well for this particular student. So some of the other pinpointed successes that we have is the Independent Study program, through the one-on-one support, through the one-on-one weekly meeting that does occur, teachers have a really expanded opportunity to target and get to know their students. The targeted instruction really allows for differentiation to occur. It really allows for teachers to hone in on interests, to help provide guidance in areas in which they need to work on or gain some skills. Through the Independent Study program and the online program that we use, parents are learning coaches. So parent involvement is really a key to the program's success and to the child's success. And so parents being heavily involved are very aware of their child's academic process and progress. And they can really see the movement that the students are doing. They can also see areas in which their student is struggling. And the communication between the teacher and the parent is key and paramount. And also everybody's working together to continue the student's progress. Also, you know, independent study has allowed families to have an opportunity to become comfortable. As we know, at the start of the year, in August, there was a surge and families were not quite ready. They were not comfortable. And so this allowed them to have some time and they were supported with their child's academics. And then this allowed them to have some time. And then as you can see by the numbers, we've had many, many students return back to in-person learning. So it allowed for them to be able to have this transition. While we are having successes, this is a new program and it is also has challenges. And so there are areas in which we have some opportunities to grow. And we wanted to just share an example of a student who this program is not quite the right fit at the moment. The student entered the program. They were academically behind in their English and math areas. And their needs through the independent study program are not quite being met due to the nature of the teacher does only see the student once a week for 1 hour, one-on-one. The family is not having success in supporting the student at home. And so, again, as we mentioned earlier, family support is a key component in order for children to be successful. And when that is not occurring, then children can have slow or diminished progress through the program. So through attempts of trying to provide some other interventions, communication with the families, teacher providing opportunities to help provide targeted, differentiated instruction, it is still a struggle and the student is at this time not continuing to be successful and they're falling further and further behind, but at this time the family continues to stay within the IS program versus returning to the traditional classroom. So it's presenting us, you know, lots of conversations are happening and just thinking about how can we continue to, you know, support students when something may not be quite the right fit. So in thinking about this is kind of thinking about, you know, one of the things we want to look for is consistency in which families are utilizing this program and making sure that those in-person meetings are happening. On occasion, sometimes families will just not attend the one-on-one meeting. If that happens, that's a lot of time between the student meeting the teacher. So that independent targeted instruction is not happening. Targeting and assessing students can become a challenge as assessments really do need to be administered in person. And if we aren't able to get that assessment data, it is difficult to assess and provide instruction to students to meet their needs. At the time, the entrance and exit criteria is open, quite open right now. And it's allowed for anybody can kind of come in and utilize the program. And so as you can see, we've had some students that are challenged, that are struggling within the program. And so having some clear entrance and exit criteria to be able to make some decisions on whether this is a fit for students. SEL support, our teachers are doing a fantastic job. The IS teachers have been amazing, and just like the teachers at Fairwood Explorer, they are helping us with our goals, and they are providing weekly lessons to students in the morning meetings. They are being able to teach, you know, some of the academic vocabulary that goes along with SEL. And students are learning a lot of the skills and a lot of the language that comes with SEL. One of the things that we note is that due to the independent study program, they are learning a lot of the skills. They don't necessarily have the opportunities to really show and use these skills interactively to then build the skills so that they become like internal habits. And so, so when we think about the social and emotional support, there are areas in which they are learning, but it is still an independent program. And so there are areas that we are not able to meet the social and emotional needs of some of our students, as it is still an independent program. So one of the things we want to just continue to think about as we think about next year and moving on and moving forward with this program is thinking about how we might be able to align the curriculum. We are currently using a program called Edgenuity, and it does provide all content, California content standards, but it isn't necessarily aligned with the district curriculum. So we want to think about how can we align more with district materials next year, maybe targeting a lot of the writing curriculum and trying to align with that. So then it also helps us align with the district benchmarks to be able to do some more of those assessments to gather some more of that data. English learners, so this is an area, you know, if we have students who are English learners, ELD needs to be happening every day, designated ELD, integrated ELD. This is a daily thing that is needed for students. Independent study, as it is independent and the students are seeing teachers 30 minutes in the morning or 1 hour a week. It isn't, you know, we need to figure out how can we make that more robust? How can we build in some more English language development for that? And also just continuing to work with our parents to be learning coaches. So to support them while also building independence for their students. So we know that parents have a caring heart and they want to help their students. But sometimes in independent study, you know, you also need to let go and still let them do it independently at home. So just continuing to build the communication with parents and working with them as partners. All right.
So that concludes our presentation, and we are open to any questions that you may have for either of us.
So right now it's time for public questions first. So if there's, I don't see any public present. So if there's any member of the public online who would like to make a comment or has a question, please raise your hand electronically. This is a weird meeting with the cloning and the electronically. Strange. No, nobody. Okay, board. Questions, comments?
I don't have any questions, but just thank you for the information. I like kind of like seeing your goals and how you're progressing on them, and like ones that are, you know, like it's new or something that you're struggling with. That was great, and then it was just good to get more information about independent study. And I haven't met you before, so it's great to kind of meet you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Oh,
Any other?
Nancy.
I appreciate the realization that sometimes we need to be more explicit and intentional, especially having students have had a virtual experience and then returning to classrooms, that they may need more intervention, and families need to appreciate that the explicitness of the information that may have been missed to make sure that we're continuing all along the same line. So I like it when I hear about scaffolding for support for academic language. That is a real key to success. So thank you.
Isabel, do you have a question or a comment?
Well, no, thank you for the presentation. So the parents are volunteering outside the classrooms. Are you gonna start doing volunteering inside the classroom or more?
Yeah, so our plan is, if those numbers continue to track the way that they have, The district has indicated that in March, we may consider being able to bring parents into the classroom. So if we get the all clear, our teachers are going to be more than happy to say, come on back in.
Are they planning to start doing again field trips and?
Yep, same thing with field trips. I've got a couple of teachers who had them on the books tentatively. I was like, as long as they don't have a non-refundable deposit, like book them and then we'll just see what happens. So we have teachers that have already booked, including a couple of our favorite overnight field trips. So.
And then about the independent study program, when they meet one-on-one, is always online or sometimes they also go to the school?
So the expectation that we set forth at the beginning of the year, and it was really key for us, is that the one-on-one meetings be in person. And so the majority of our students are coming onto the Fairwood campus and they are meeting with families or meeting with their teachers in person. We do have some families that selected that to continue to do virtual. We continue to work with those families to really try to transition them to, coming onto campus, at least to meet your teacher one-on-one, and just building up that skill of returning to campus and becoming more comfortable and more familiar. And so we've had some of those families that have transitioned, and we're going to continue working on that, hopefully into trimester 3 to get more students to seeing their teachers in person.
And the goal is that the kids want to come back to in person, or this is just a part of the
So
program?
this year, the California really cast a wide net for what independent study is because of COVID. And so as a result, we allowed a lot of people to join independent study. Really, they didn't have to state a reason. It was just, come on, join the program if this is what feels right for your family right now. When we had originally been exploring independent study, long-term independent study, we had really been looking at casting a somewhat narrower net to really address specific needs in which a student maybe had a challenge that would prevent them from being able to come onto campus. It could be things like social anxiety around school. It could be something around maybe a medical condition that prevented them from being in a community of a large number of people. And so as we're planning for next year, one of the things that we're going to be looking at is what is the right net to be casting as we move into next year. The expectation is that we're transitioning into a period of more normalcy where the COVID, the reasons that many families joined, which was COVID, might not be a reason why we would want families to be joining independent study. As many people have been saying, it is time for us to kind of start looking at COVID as something a little bit more endemic and that we need to learn to live with it. And so we're looking at that transition, but we're gonna have to decide as a team, what does that net look like for next year?
And is there, because you say that is the social emotional part is not being completely approached by the program because it's everyone in their own home. Is there a possibility or was there a plan to make, I don't know, because like the kids meet or do some activities together, even though, I don't know, maybe online activities, or there is like a way to go around?
So at the beginning, that was not an option, that we were not at the point to be able to bring students together. Many of the families did not also want that to happen. Some of the students have had opportunities to meet one another, and we know that outside of school, some of our independent study students have gotten together. Some of our teachers are now partnering students and they're meeting together like in pairs, and so now they're having a few more opportunities to be able to interact with one another. Currently, the wishes of the parents is to still keep their children, many of the parents, to keep them independent. And so there could be possibilities, and it would be something that we would hope to be actually to provide some more opportunities for more interaction in person next year within the program.
And I would highlight that one of the goals in placing independent study at a specific school site this year was to be able to have them be a part of the school community. So every event, anything that we've done, our independent study families have been fully included as a part of that. As Shayna said, many of them have chosen not to come because many of our families did join independent study because of concerns around COVID. But we have had some families join. We had a couple of families who came for picture day, and I know that a couple of them came kind of to the Halloween parade. We invited all of them to come, things like that. But for right now, it's been a little bit slow going. We're hoping that as more families are becoming more comfortable going into the spring, that hopefully a lot more will show up for some of our spring events.
And is there an opportunity, because we do have a small but still important part of our community that may have some immunodeficiency issues and every day is more dangerous for them, to still have some sort of social emotional care for them and use this kind of program that is still, I don't know, online, or there is a way that we can figure it out how to make, have friends and interact with other kids, or.
Yeah, so I think that's something that we certainly had a goal for expanding into. One of the challenges has been that our staffing has kind of flexed as the number of students has flexed within the program. And so we got to a point where everybody had very full caseloads with one-to-one meetings for 1 hour. If you have 20 kids, really quickly, your schedule gets filled. So as our numbers kind of dropped, there's been a hope to be able to provide more opportunities for that because the teachers have a little bit more wiggle room in their schedules to provide that. We have looked at using Hvac as well. So students in independent study can be referred to Hvac just the same way that anyone else in the school can be. Again, it comes down to, there have been quite a few families who have indicated that either they don't feel comfortable having their kids come in person, or they can't commit to having another virtual meeting within their schedule. So sometimes there's limitations in what families will agree to.
So, I'm very interested in keeping independent study open to families who wanted it needed, like not just as a medical emergency, because that might be something different, but I think COVID is with us for a while, and I think that, I think it's gonna be here for a while. It's gonna be a while until there's a feeling of like how many people are vaccinated, and it's just gonna be kind of a mess for a little while longer. Are you hearing from families that they would want to continue next year, or like, oh, if there's a vaccine requirement at the state level, then they'd be more comfortable coming back? Like, have you heard any, what's the feedback from the community that's there?
We've sent out a message to families a couple of weeks ago, letting them know that there is an expectation that the state will be narrowing the scope of independent study. From that message, I think we've heard from maybe 2 or 3 families that indicated that they'd like more information about that. But most families seem to kind of take that as like, okay, that's fine. We'll go ahead and transition back. I think one of the concerns that we have and that we shared during the presentation is that some of the families that have indicated that they want to stay with the program might not be the best fit for their child. And that's been a real hard thing because the sample student that we discussed is falling further and further behind, has not made academic progress this year. The parents have admitted that they don't have the time to make sure their child is doing their schoolwork, and basically indicated that's okay, we'll just have them repeat the grade level, which unfortunately is not the right path to really supporting the student. In addition to that, we've had some concerning conversations with some parents. We had a family that shared that they had, as a family unit, not left their house for 22 months. That's also a concerning situation. So while we want to be sensitive to the needs of families, we also feel that obligation to really think about the best interest of a student, of a child, and think about what are some scenarios in which this might not be the best match, even if it's what the preference of the family would be. And that's why that entrance and exit criteria, I think, is going to be a key part to kind of being able to maybe put some limits on that.
When we approved independent study, there was some, I know it was originally going to be a more stringent entrance, but wasn't there some wasn't there some exit criteria for that when we approved it initially? Or has that gone away with the new COVID thing?
Well, with the new COVID thing, that kind of went away, but we are still utilizing from the standpoint of what Michelle just talked about with regards to if it's not working, we still have an obligation to talk about it's not working and see if we can, educate the parent to look at other options or, see what we can redo. So we are going through that process as well as SARBing when we need to, if students are not attending.
Okay, well, I don't have any further questions, board, any further questions or comments other than they're completely awesome and we appreciate them.
Yeah, thank you for a great independent study.
Yeah, very.
Thank you.
Very
Our pleasure.
informative, and we
Yeah.
love seeing Fairwood. I love seeing the school and what everyone's doing, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, always a pleasure.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of the
Yep.
weekend.
Have a good evening.
Good job, Shayna.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're on to item 9, review and discussion, local control and accountability plan, LCAP mid-year update.
Okay, Ms. Ahuja is unfortunately away on a family emergency tonight, so Tasha and I will tag team this, so to speak. So just as an overview, you remember last year we wrote a whole new LCAP, and that's a 3-year LCAP, and so this is one of the years that this is one of the years for renewal, or not for renewal, for revision, review and revision.
Yeah.
Being thrown off here.
Troubleshooting. Okay.
We good?
Yeah.
Okay, so a thing that the state mandated this year, which I actually think, a lot of things they mandate, I don't know so much, but this one, I think this is something that our board wanted anyway, so it's a good idea. And so that's a mid-year update. So take a look at the goals and see how we're progressing towards the goals that we said we set out in the LCAP. This is a nice time to do it because as you saw, we had the Equity Summit, which is a big community input into the LCAP activity. The schools are doing, each individually doing input activities. And we're going to summarize all that for you on April 28th at the April 28th Board of Education meeting. So you got some data tonight. We're going to collect data on input from the community by the 28th. And so all that we'll be collecting your thoughts and your perspectives about like any revisions we would do. That's not a major overhaul of the LCAP, but any course corrections that we might want to do in advance of, you'll remember there's always 2 meetings before it's approved in June, right? And that corresponds with the approval of the budget. So that's the overview. We provided the slides with all of the data, and we're happy to answer any specific questions that you have now as best we can. So,
Okay.
that I do. Okay, good.
Board, do you have anything that you wanted to discuss first? Does anyone want to go first? Yeah. Do anyone want to go
Ask for
first?
public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm used to there being a presentation for public comment, but
Yeah.
I apologize. So, if there's any member of the public who wishes to comment or ask a question about, or actually just to comment on this section, please use the raised hand feature on Zoom. And seeing none, board, do you have any comments?
We just jump in.
Sure.
Well, there were a few of them, and also that have been highlighted in the Equity Summit that I thought they were touched and I thought they are great ideas. One of them, for example, I think one of the speakers were talking about employee evaluations and hiring requirements to make equity part of the system somewhere, recognizing the importance for us, how equity is part of what we do, putting it somewhere there, so like giving it some priority. Either, I don't know, putting like points or something. I thought, well, I've been telling a few times during the year, quite a few times about some sort of training available, but maybe if we don't make it, if you don't wanna make it Monday, but we at least make some sort of point system or hours or whatever that is towards equity. It also, as I said this before.
That was goal 1, right?
Yes, that has to do with goal 1. Because, yeah, but referring to staff, also the idea, you know, when you, I've been applying to more colleges, but when you apply to college or high school right now, part of the screening, they ask you, you have an equity interview or an equity questionnaire. And then after that, then you go on an interview and ask about why you wanna teach or do that position. But that's like the first part, like you screen people who has a vision or training or understanding of what equity means, and then you move, you know, the qualifications and everything else. So it's like making it somehow part of our structure, who we are. We couldn't know exactly where, but somehow filtering there. And that's with the goal 1. With the goal.
If I could hold on to you that second one, because I wanna, we actually had a conversation about this, was it this week or last week?
Well, actually, it's been over
Okay.
several weeks, but with intentionality in the last 2
In
weeks.
cabinet, yeah. And it's interesting, it's something that each member of cabinet and their departments has a role in. So I know, Jeremy, why don't you talk about what your part would be, and then, yeah. Because we actually think that's really, really important to have a workforce that, first of all, we have to set a vision for what do we mean by equity? And I think as a district, we're doing that. But then how do we communicate that to the people who we're trying to attract and to hire? And then how do we keep it going? So.
Yes, so I think the holistic approach was something that's pretty exciting to be hearing from each member of cabinet and the part that we play. It's not any one person's job to deliver equity to the district. So from the human resources side, we're really taking a look at our onboarding process now that we have the clear equity statement to make sure that it's reflected in our structures. So you're gonna start seeing, like even tonight, there's a couple of job descriptions, and then I know the new ones that are coming are from management side, but you're gonna see explicit line items in there about the role that they're to play, even in hypothetically, or not hypothetically, realistically, the student nutrition or child nutrition manager, their role in moving the district's equity work forward from their perspective, right? The director of student services one explicitly says that they're gonna take a little bit more of an active role, and then we're having conversations with our employee associations about all classifications of job descriptions to start doing that. So that's just one example of how equity is going to start infiltrating, if you will, our structures, because if we just talked about it with the equity statement and the equity summit, and it doesn't translate to that, that's one piece. Onboarding is another way to just, highlight the fact we are infusing questions regarding equity and their beliefs in the interview process. But we want to be careful that we don't how to word this. We want to make sure it's not that you're proficient in equity, but you are the right mindset to come into the system, because we want to make sure that they're open to it, and then it becomes our job to then explain the Sunnyvale's way, our implementation, the equity statement, and the work being done. And then lastly, the last thing I'll say, and I'll hand it off to Tasha, is we need to make sure then that we're priming these candidates, and then they're handed off to the sites, but then it's also apparent to them in their day-to-day that they're not just coming in and saying, oh, excellent, and then they don't see any of that evidence work. We need to make sure that then there's a nice handoff into the day-to-day work, and they can see those elements so that they feel satisfied and continue to work. So then that kind of hands it off to Tasha.
Yes, and so if you remember when we talked about equity, was that the last board meeting, when we talked about our framework, so that's a part of the structure so that it's flowing through at every level. So no matter whether we're talking about from our operations staff to whomever, it's there. And then right now, like with our equity coaches and socio-emotional and all of that, blending some of that work together to infuse with like our PBIS teams, our grade level teams. So kind of infusing that at every level for the instructional leaders that are then going back to their sites and support. That's one of the reasons we made this decision, Christina and I, that we didn't really want an equity team or a district whatever, because then it changes the mindset that, oh, those people do that, or that team does that, but we want it to be that, no, we do that, each and every person. So infusing that at every level, through that, what does that mean? And helping us to become more proficient in the work and for it to become more organic and natural, that's what we do here in Sunnyvale, because it's the right thing to do for students.
So we're excited about that you brought that up because we've been talking about it and like, I think they captured, like, it's not just like a one thing, there's be some questions on the interview packet, or you read the equity statement and you check off that you received it and then you're on your way. It's like gotta be the whole system. So that's the approach that we're taking.
And will they be evaluated for equity as well? Like, will they be, because I think that's what he was saying in the equity summit. He said, you know, you ought to have it be part of the evaluation in some way, like whether they're, I mean, I know it's tricky, but I mean, as far as when we're going through the evaluations.
Yeah, it's funny where my head goes on that goes to like the CSTPs, right? And without having them in front of me, California Standards for the Teaching Profession. That's the framework that we use for teacher evaluation. And there's something similar for almost every other classification. And my guess is that that's embedded in it, but it's like it could be there for the last 10 years, but like if we shine a light on it, then you see it, right? And so what you're saying is let's shine a light on that part of it to make sure that it's seen and recognized.
Yeah, I was gonna add on like what Isabel said. I was gonna add on that piece. The note that I had was the hiring with the equity lens qualifications, we talked about, but the equity should be in evaluations of all staff, like from the teacher to the lunch worker, like everybody. And so I felt like as you guys were talking, like maybe they're talking about that piece, or I didn't know if you were, so that would be, it sounds like most of us like that idea of including that as you're doing this work.
Right, and then I'll just say we are engaging in negotiations with both associations. Evaluation is on there, and I guess we'd just say that it is time to start having those conversations. But remember, we're using interest-based, and so it is an evolution. We're not and letting that play out, but it could even start manifesting itself even in the evaluation process through goal setting, even on the classified side, like that could be a department goal, like maybe, well, this is what's gonna happen for our SIS team. It's gonna challenge them coming into next year. Beginning of the year, goal setting for their goals, like how can we as the student information system team implement equity into our thing? And so it could be, what is that called? Informal or formal. And so again, the equity work is starting that work in all aspects. And again, we're gonna keep moving there isn't one thing that's gonna implement and cure. So we are committed to just starting to make progress, and eventually we're gonna get that momentum where it'll become unstoppable.
Yeah, maybe give opportunities, I don't know, not just training or whatever opportunity, so they can do some professional development directly focused on equity, so they can achieve X points or hours or whatever you want to measure.
And part of the theory of action too is if we create a system that puts equity at the forefront, then diverse teachers or employees of diverse backgrounds will see that and want to be part of it, right?
Yeah.
We're creating a culture where they're feeling welcomed and valued. That would be the theory of action for that.
Just to add on really quickly, so San Jose Unified, I think that they have they're one of the school districts that, is it not?
You're just not.
I'm just not anywhere near it. So I think it was San Jose Unified that they have a system where it's like a rigorous equity kind of questionnaire, but they had some of their name to it and then people were gaming it or something, you know, and then they had to redevelop it or whatever. But from someone who went through that, they told me that, you know, it was very thought-provoking and it really made them stop and think. And so rather than having one or two questions on the interview side, to really, kind of have them stretch a little would be great.
But that was only goal number 1, so.
Yeah, goal.
I think we're going into what we're supposed to be doing in April right now, right? I did too, right? Today,
Well, that's my fault.
Any feedback right now, or is this just the update? and then we get feedback in the spring. So
Well,
maybe a
this-
little bit clarification of the purpose of right now as we're doing discussion.
We're just doing the interest bargain, no?
No,
So
no.
this could be part of, I mean, in the, not right now, but I mean, as a district, we're doing a lot of things related with what we want or what we wish.
So this is just an update, but we are not allowed to talk about anything unless it's on the agenda. And so we're talking about, if the feedback is, hey, what do you think of these goals? Do these goals still work? And like Isabel was
But
saying.
is that the purpose right now? I thought that's what we're doing in April.
Yeah,
That's
that's a
why I
little,
just wanted
that would be a little
clarification.
stretch for today. Today, we're just looking at the major update of the data
Yeah, and where we are.
and where we are.
So like I was a part too, I'm not accusing anyone, because I totally did it too, but I realized after today, I'm like, wait, I think
That's
what we're
really my
doing
fault.
is actually spring stuff, not current stuff. I just want us to like, okay,
I
get
think
the,
we're
get the vision of it.
So
Isabel, did you have something else? So that was
I think-
just one idea.
I
you
think
had?
Nancy was
Well, there
saying-
was one idea for goal one.
Liked it.
So I think probably, Nancy, just 1 second, because I know Isabel was still talking and then she jumped in. So I just want to say that it seems like, I'm guessing that the board would probably like a study session to talk about these goals more in depth, you know, like as we get closer to the LCAP, not as like the LCAP is a finished product, because you know, lots of things came up in the equity summit. We're gonna see things bubble up from the sites. I'm interested in looking at the policies a little bit more, like, you know, I had some thoughts around that. Isabel's been going through and like really thinking about in terms of the goals, like what kinds of things. So we would like, so whenever.
I think that's that's what April is, that's
That's
the
what
thing we
April is.
So
started,
if
right?
that's what April is, like maybe that's not on an agenda with a whole bunch of other stuff.
Like
You know
that
what I
might need to,
mean?
that might need to be like
That
a
might-
2-hour thing,
That might need
not
to
just
be,
an hour.
so we're gonna have to, you and I can look
We
at
can work
that.
on that.
But
I
I
think it's
think
good that it
that's,
will be a longer chunk than just 1 hour.
So Isabel, we don't want to cut you off, but like, can
Nancy
you
too.
like just,
Okay,
you know, Nancy,
yeah,
she's like,
maybe
we
a
stopped
couple,
her.
yeah, because
But
then,
it's a little bit
you know,
more about
whenever we're gonna
comments
have it,
on the-
whenever
on
we
the
have time
updates.
either. So we didn't have that much time this year, so it's always like fighting a little bit time here and there. But is one of the things that we talk a lot, and I don't know if it's kind of instituted, that it has to do with goal 4 as taking the, like partnering with the parents and the families and make it culturally responsible, which also pretty much goes with all of the other goals. Is that not in all schools we have PTA meetings or events that are bilingual. So maybe we should kind of address that somehow to make this goal actually shine and be part of what we're doing. And also we've been talking about this, I don't know if it was in the last meeting and also in the equity, of asking the questions in like if some particular group is not being part of the participation, or there is one group that it doesn't feel identified or welcome in a particular site, what are the steps that we're doing to invite them, to talk with them? Do we have enough workers, like not just social workers, or like the people who is supposed to be working on making sure that all families and all community stakeholders are feeling welcome and part of the education system.
So I had a question with regards to goal number 4 as well. I appreciate that you're trying to do more welcoming with the tools that we have with Panorama. We're going to be doing another survey in the springtime with Panorama, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So at that point in time, we'll be modifying questions to make that, and I'm specifically concerned about the low engagement rate at one of the school sites. Just wanting to make sure that we're understanding what barriers might have been occurring during that fall season, and what can we do to try and see practically how we can can increase that. And have we reached out to Panorama to find out what their best practices are with school sites that have similar demographics?
Well, I know it's probably didn't sound great, but our participation rate is actually higher than a lot of places. So we're actually, so we're a bit of a trendsetter there, but we do have some ideas and activities in mind, and we're really hopeful with the trends being positive because we want to have parents, when they're dropping off and picking up, to be able to conduct some of their surveys that way and have devices available for them on campus. So we're in the midst right now of getting feedback on questions. So those have gone out to the sites and things that we had feedback on from the last survey. We kind of keep that information and we always incorporate that into the questions. So that's where we are in the process now, is getting feedback on the questions and what should be asked and why.
Okay, thank you.
So I have feedback on goal 4 as well. Goal 4, I feel like, when I was looking at the measurements for goal 4, like Isabel, I was thinking about some of our policies regarding translation services and other things. And I just did a search on our website, and where we have policies around translation services are for our Title I schools, and I didn't, on the search, nothing else really came up. So, when we have larger populations at other schools, or when we have populations at other schools, there's just there's no institutionalized practice because it just hasn't been a policy. Like maybe it's needed, but it's not, it's just like there's no policy around that. And so maybe it's time to look at our policies in terms of not just what we're legally required to do with the Title I schools and or think about our practices in general. But, that's not immediate. More immediate would be what you're saying about the surveys at the school sites. It's almost like you need the In-N-Out burger guy or person, you need the In-N-Out burger person entering stuff right there. So, so instead of just having, breaking it into chunks that parents can do, and as the school sites open up, as we start having more meetings where people are in person and people are coming to campuses, like for a walkathon or for whatever, have someone there asking questions and trying to get that information. Where I really find Panorama valuable is the student side of things, because the teachers can give them class time to do it, which I'm sure they don't love because they have other things they want to do with their class time. But it's very valuable because the kids are pretty honest, and I just don't think that, it makes me really sad that when you say 50 a majority, which is a simple majority, 50% plus one person, out of the small amount of people who are responding, who took the time to respond, that's how much feel welcomed or positive or whatever, in that way. And it was just and it's just, okay, it's a year, this is part of because people are feeling a bit disconnected and all that other things. It's not surprising that the numbers are that way or that there's a disconnect, but I feel like as an ongoing measurement, Panorama is probably not the best measurement for parent feelings about how things are going. It's just so it would just be so great if it was, because then we could quantify things better. So I am very interested in working on goal 4 for parents, family, and communities, because I feel like with goal 4, that's going to make our English learners, I just feel like it's going to make our English learners more successful and feel like they're more welcomed as well. And it dovetails into everything else that we're doing. So I asked the question, who's responsible for parent education? Perhaps going forward, we could think about it being more centralized, even still adjustable, but what are
Bridget,
we doing?
thi-
Yeah,
this is the next meeting conversation.
I know, but I'm just throwing it out there. So I mean, like, if we're allowed to talk about LCAP right now, I'm just giving feedback on this. So I don't know what the answer is, but I would like, I would just like to have focus on goal 4. Okay.
And if it's okay, I do want to give you just one update based
Yeah.
upon something you said. Translation and interpreting services are available across the campus, regardless if it's Title I or not. And we do use a lot of that for phone conversations, even for the sites who don't have the outreach coordinators. Those services are available at each and every site, just so you're aware of that, in case you
yeah.
didn't. Okay.
But I'm thinking about things
Like parent meetings and-
parent meetings and the parent trainings that are happening.
You've
So they're
given
part
the
of the-
example specifically of SMS and the Spanish translation services, like that's a good example.
Yeah, and I think maybe at other schools that just don't think about it as much,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'm sure we're gonna talk about LCAP a ton because we just love it so much. We love the topic. It's super important and, thanks for the update. Okay, let's see, we're on to the consent agenda. If there's any member of the public that wishes to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature now. Okay, seeing none, would the board like to pull any item for separate consideration and vote or discussion?
I move approval of the consent agenda as listed.
I'll second that.
Okay, board, any questions or comments on the consent agenda? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the consent agenda has passed. We're moving on to item 11, public comments on closed session items. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak on this item, please use the raised hand feature now. Okay, seeing none, it is 8:59 p.m. And we are going to we're going to break for a closed session. When we come back, we will report out and adjourn. For anyone who may not be here when we return, thank you and have a great evening.
Know what we get, it's 9 o'clock. I don't remember.
Good night, Monica and Fabiola, thank you.
Yeah, well, I am, but in case, I can check in, just in case there's something I need to think about, I don't have any time.
You have no clue. This has been the hardest thing for me. Oh, Lord.
It's 9. Hi, we are reconvening to open session at 9:50 p.m. The board met in closed session to discuss superintendent performance evaluation. No action was taken. Our next meeting will be Thursday, March 3rd at 6 p.m. It'll be a regular board meeting at the district office boardroom and on Zoom. This meeting is adjourned 9:50.